Chapter 1. Where am I? Luo Fan gradually woke up from his muddled state. He opened his eyelids that were as heavy as a mountain, and such a thought appeared in his mind. The glaring light pierced into his eyes, and he could not help but close his eyes again. After a long time, when the pain subsided, he slowly opened his eyes. As soon as he opened his eyes, he knew that he was no longer on Earth. It was impossible for there to be such a tall and huge mountain on Earth. In a place far away from him, he could vaguely see a huge mountain that looked like a heavenly pillar, rising from the ground and piercing the clouds. Even though it was too far away, and the mountain looked blurry from afar, Luo Fan still could not see the peak of the mountain. Even if he tilted his head so that it was parallel to the ground, he could only see the mountain that continued to extend upwards. Am I dreaming? Or have I transmigrated? Another thought emerged in his mind. As this thought appeared in his mind, he suddenly felt as if his head was being hammered by countless iron hammers in a frenzy. Boom, 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 boom. The sound was accompanied by endless pain. Countless strange images, sounds, and all kinds of information kept surging out from the depths of his mind. Like a balloon being inflated, his head swelled up to the point that it was about to explode. Roar! An incomparably loud beast roar suddenly burst out from his mouth. This beast roar was like a thunderclap on a clear day, as if the world had turned upside down. Then, very naturally, Luo Fan fainted in happiness after an unknown amount of time. Luo Fan once again woke up from his muddled state. After he woke up, before he opened his eyes, he completely understood his current situation. So, I've already transmigrated. In his mind, there was now a large amount of incomparably large but extremely monotonous memories. He appeared in this world in a muddle-headed state. He wandered around in a muddle-headed manner. After eating, he slept, and after sleeping, he ate. This process lasted for an unknown number of millennia, or perhaps tens of thousands of years. One day, he came to a place that made him feel extremely comfortable. He fell asleep on the spot until he completely lost consciousness. Then Luo Fan's consciousness appeared. Eat and sleep, sleep and eat. This kind of life is really desirable. Luo Fan smiled bitterly and shook his body. He had now turned into a monster with the head of a dragon, the body of a horse, and the feet of a unicorn. He looked like a lion, and his fur was gray. This monster had a world-famous name, Paishio. Since there was such a legendary Paishio here, it was naturally impossible for it to still be on Earth. This was the untainted land. Yes, it was the primitive world created by Pangu, and it had only been less than 100,000 years since Pangu created the world and died. The indescribably tall mountain that he first saw was the northwest sky pillar of the untainted land, the backbone of Pangu, Buzhou Mountain. It was said in Huainanzi, astronomical teachings, in the past, Gong Gong and Zhuanshu fought for the throne, and they touched Buzhou Mountain in anger. The sky pillar was broken, and the earth was destroyed. The sky tilted to the northwest, so the moon and stars moved. The earth was not satisfied to the southwest, so the water and dust returned. Buzhou Mountain was broken, and the sky tilted to the northwest. Didn't that mean that Buzhou Mountain should be supporting the sky in the northwest, and it should be the northwest sky pillar? Luo Fan's dragon head, which was completely unfamiliar to him, forced a helpless smile. Although he was surprised about how and why he transmigrated, he did not feel the joy, pain, or panic that ordinary people would have when they experience such a thing. Because compared to the thousands or tens of thousands of years of memories brought by this body, the memories of his more than 20 years on Earth were simply like a drop in the ocean, not worth mentioning. Although he did not forget the experiences on Earth, and even remembered them more clearly than ever, the various unforgettable emotions were constantly being worn away and diluted in the monotonous memory of this Paishio. This caused his mood to become extremely tranquil. Looking at Buzhou Mountain again, Luo Fan suddenly felt an unparalleled shock. A vast and unyielding what was constantly emitting from Buzhou Mountain. Although this place was millions of miles away from Buzhou Mountain, the vast and unyielding will still did not weaken. Even though it was so far away, it was still constantly affecting everything around Luo Fan. Looking at the immeasurably high Buzhou Mountain, which was constantly emitting a terrifying aura, Luo Fan's heart unknowingly welled up with an indescribable feeling. This feeling was as if he had already become the mountain in front of him that was millions of miles away. His 4 feet were stepping on the incomparably vast, incomparably stable ground, and his head was looking at the incomparably distant, incomparably mysterious sky. A feeling of being indomitable, of never yielding, and never giving up instantly filled his entire heart. Puff! A light sound suddenly exploded in Luo Fan's head. Although this light sound was only light, it was as if the heavens and the earth were splitting apart, instantly waking Luo Fan up from that indescribable feeling. What's going on? Luo Fan's heart was filled with bewilderment. He felt that within his body, there was something that did not exist before, or that he could not perceive. After carefully perceiving that thing, he suddenly felt the world spin, and his consciousness had already entered an indescribable place. His surroundings were dusky, as if it was chaotic, and his own body had become a very strange existence. Lowering his head to take a look, a fist-sized, vivid, and lifelike little Pichio was his current body. This little Pichio's entire body was chaotic, and its translucent form seemed illusory yet real. It was very agile and very cute. Soul. Primordial spirit? Luo Fan was extremely surprised in his heart. Whether it was the 20 years of memories on Earth, or the many years of memories of this Pichio, they all told him that he simply did not have any cultivation technique. Luo Fan naturally didn't need to say that on Earth, this Pichio's tens of thousands of years of experience had always been muddle-headed. Although, because it was born and raised by the heavens, it had some information about this world and its memories, but it had absolutely no knowledge about cultivation. The only thing that made him different was that this body could spontaneously and instinctively absorb innate vitality. And with his muddle-headed mind that only knew to eat and sleep, sleep and eat, it was naturally impossible for him to look into his own body. Therefore, this dusky space that seemed like chaos was actually Luo Fan, and also the place where the Pichio first came to, making Luo Fan simply unable to find any information about this place in the Pichio's memories. His mind felt very wonderful in this unknown soul or primordial spirit, as if it had gotten rid of all restraints, becoming incomparably relaxed and incomparably free. Shaking his body, the surrounding dusky space trembled for a moment and gradually receded. Not long after, a spherical nothingness area with a diameter of 1 meter was vacated. Moving his body, he came to the edge of this spherical area and walked out, as if he had encountered a wall that could not be resisted. Fiercely colliding, a mysterious information suddenly poured into Luo Fan's mind. Along with this mysterious information, Luo Fan instantly understood where he was at this time, and also understood what his current state was. So, this is my sea of consciousness, and I am now in the state of the soul. He secretly thought in his heart. In his heart, he understood that such a small spherical area was the scope of his sea of consciousness at this time, and further out was not an area that he could set foot in. Secretly sighing, Luo Fan's mind slightly moved. This fist-sized, chaotic little Pichio rushed in an inexplicable direction, as if it had broken through an incomparably powerful invisible shackle, breaking into a dazzling, extremely colorful space, and also filled with an endless and unyielding aura. Looking down, his body was lying below, his expression serene, as if he was sleeping. Mist pervaded the air around his body, and only a faint outline of the rocks beneath him could be seen. Not knowing how far ahead, there was a towering mountain that could not be seen, rising from the ground, towering into the clouds, emitting an incomparably powerful aura. Impressively, it was already outside his body. A breeze blew, his body floated. Without the restraint of his body, the distance between him and heaven and earth was closer than ever. The whole world became unprecedentedly beautiful, unprecedentedly clear. The vast, An unyielding aura around him also seemed to become more obvious, more intense. Shrouded in this aura, Luo Fan suddenly felt that even if the sky collapsed, it could not make him yield, could not make him give up. At this time, it was less than 100,000 years since Pangu opened the sky. The evolution of the entire untainted land had not stabilized. In addition to the endless innate chi of the entire untainted land, there were also many special places in the untainted land with infinite chi of chaos. For example, the Pisho had found this crypt countless years ago, and it was a crypt that emitted dense chaotic energy at all times. It was also precisely because it was emitting chi of chaos that Pisho, who was born with the world at the beginning of the world, felt comfortable and stayed here. Although the vast and unyielding aura emitted from the Bujo Mountain made Luo Fan feel very good. This aura was really too strong. It was so strong that his spirit, which had just formed, could not withstand it for too long. After the spirit stayed outside for less than 10 minutes, Luo Fan felt a stabbing pain coming from all parts of his spirit. The originally translucent, chaotic body became even more transparent. Knowing that this divine soul was still fragile and couldn't stay outside his body for too long, Luo Fan's mind moved and controlled the divine soul to drill into the top of his head. As soon as it entered his body, without going through any process, the body returned to the spherical area of nothingness with a diameter of 1 meter. The pain caused by the corrosion of the aura outside disappeared in the blink of an eye, and every part of his spirit became warm and comfortable. Sure enough, before the spirit is strong enough, the body must not be abandoned. Luo Fan sighed in his heart. With a thought, he left the spirit and returned to his body. Chapter 2. When Pangu created the world, the first kind of pneuma produced in the world was the primordial energy. This kind of chaotic energy was the first type of energy that was produced when the world had just been born and the chaos hadn't been completely divided. Therefore, it contained the aura of chaos and possessed the attribute of chaos. It was incomparably violent and powerful, and its miraculous uses were boundless. After the appearance of the primordial energy, as time went by, the evolution of the world was gradually perfected. The primordial energy could no longer exist stably, so it began to constantly evolve into the innate pneuma that could nourish all things. This process would continue until the entire untainted land was completely stable and all the primordial energy was completely transformed into the innate pneuma. After the untainted land was completely evolved, it would transform from the innate pneuma to the acquired pneuma. The innate pneuma would also continue to evolve and gradually evolve into the acquired pneuma. The acquired pneuma was also the chi of heaven and earth that the cultivators of later generations called. Of course, the duration of these evolution processes was calculated in terms of yuan hui, or even cultivation tribulations. For this process, thousands or tens of thousands of years could even be ignored if one was careless. Both the primordial energy and the innate pneuma had all kinds of effects that the acquired pneuma did not have. They had endless magical effects on the evolution of life. In the process of the interweaving and evolution of the primordial energy, all kinds of powerful life could be produced out of thin air. They were born innately and had no parents. For example, the various living creatures wandering in the untainted land at this time were the living creatures evolved from the interweaving of the primordial energy. Although the magical effects of the innate pneuma were slightly inferior to the primordial energy, it could fill the world and replenish one's lifespan. As long as one lived and breathed in the innate pneuma, one would have an unlimited lifespan and would not age or die. Because of this, the first group of living creatures in the untainted land, which was formed by the primordial energy, were still wandering in the untainted land less than 100,000 years after the untainted land was created. Obviously, these immortal first group of living creatures were powerful and had an unlimited lifespan. They could all be called innate gods. The Pishio that Luo Fan had transformed into was obviously on the last group of innate gods. However, it was different from what he had imagined. As an innate god, He could only absorb the primordial energy instinctively and search for the primordial energy to infuse into his body to strengthen himself. He did not have any legendary cultivation method. To strengthen oneself was the instinct of any living creature. As the innate gods born from the chaotic energy, if they wanted to strengthen themselves, it was obviously not enough to just absorb the innate energy. Although Luo Fan had lain in the cave for countless years, he could only absorb a little bit of the chaotic energy by relying on the invasion of the chaotic energy. As a result, the chaotic energy released by the cave did not increase much because of his existence. From the memories of the Pai Xiao, he knew the benefits of the primal chaos energy to him. Luo Fan took a deep breath of the primal chaos energy. The primal chaos energy smoothly entered his body through his nostrils. However, when he exhaled, the primal chaos energy came out of his nostrils again. At most, only a tiny bit of it was absorbed by him. This was the great benefit he had obtained after his spirit took shape. Before his spirit took shape, it was impossible for him to absorb such a tiny amount of chaotic energy. This crypt was constantly emitting chaotic energy, and under the gray fog, the area of 3 miles around the crypt seemed especially desolate. But 3 miles away, all kinds of plants were exceptionally lush, and the ancient trees were dense. The two formed a great contrast. Luo Fan tried and found that no matter how hard he tried, he could do nothing to the chaotic energy. There was no sign of his absorption of the primal chaos energy increasing. He could not help but feel helpless. The appearance of my spirit before seemed to be because I was observing Buzhou Mountain and felt the aura emitted by Buzhou Mountain. Will it be the same as before if I want to absorb the chaotic energy? Yes, it must be possible. Now that the world has just been created, everything is still evolving. Everything must contain some mysteries of the evolution of the world. Buzhou Mountain is the backbone of Pangu, so it must contain more mysteries of the world. If I observe Buzhou Mountain and feel the aura emitted by it, I will definitely be able to understand some mysteries of the world, and may even be able to comprehend my own cultivation method. Luo Fan's eyes sparkled, and his heart was filled with hope. He thought of the novels he had read before, which always talked about the seniors who observed certain phenomena or things, and then comprehended certain cultivation methods. Since they could do it, he came to this untainted land, which had just been created not long ago, and was still evolving, so the conditions for comprehension were even better. There was no reason why he could not comprehend it. With this confidence, Luo Fan threw his head back and let out a long roar. Roar! The dragon's roar was like a thunderclap, and it stirred up the gray, chaotic energy around him. Luo Fan had already made up his mind to comprehend his own cultivation method from Buzhou Mountain. Naturally, he would not hesitate any longer. He chose a comfortable posture and lay down on the crypt, blocking the crypt that was emitting chaotic energy under his body. He gazed into the distance of the indescribably tall Buzhou Mountain, relaxed his mind, and tried his best to sense the boundless and unyielding aura emitted by Buzhou Mountain. Even if he stayed in the room of orchids for a long time, he would not be able to smell its fragrance. Similarly, when he was constantly enveloped by the boundless and unyielding aura emitted by Buzhou Mountain, he would naturally not be able to sense the existence of this incomparably mysterious aura after a long time. Now that he had relaxed his mind, after a long time, he once again felt that indescribably grand aura. As his mind was enveloped by this aura, a feeling of fighting against the heavens and the earth, never yielding and never giving up, emerged in his heart. The image of Buzhou Mountain was reflected in his eyes. He gradually focused his mind, and his eyesight gradually became stronger. The blurry image of Buzhou Mountain gradually became clearer. Mount Buzhou was the backbone of Pangu, and it was the pillar of the northwest sky. Its own effects determined that it definitely contained boundless secrets of the world, and it was even to the extent that merely its shape possessed an unbelievable might. At this moment, Luo Fan suddenly felt that he had completely merged with that boundless and unyielding aura. He seemed to have once again transformed into the pillar of the heavens that rose from the ground and pierced through the clouds. The incomparably vast and stable earth, the incomparably distant, and the incomparably mysterious sky seemed to have completely merged with him. As this feeling appeared, Luo Fan's body gradually changed as well. Around him, those wisps of chaotic power, which could only be absorbed by Luo Fan in a barely noticeable way, suddenly turned into sharks that smelled blood, crazily surging towards Luo Fan's body. They surged ceaselessly into Luo Fan's body through all the acupoints of Luo Fan's body. After surging into his body, the chaotic power divided into hundreds of streams inside his body, circulating at high speed according to hundreds of mysterious and unpredictable routes. After each of these streams of chaotic power went through a cycle, they produced all kinds of magical changes, then were devoured by the mud pill palace in the center of his eyebrows. This process continued as Luo Fan merged with the heavens and the earth. Luo Fan's body absorbed the chaotic power faster and faster, fiercer and fiercer. 1,000 years passed in a blink of an eye. All the chaotic power in the surroundings of this cave had been absorbed into his body, and after a series of miraculous changes, the chaotic power was absorbed into his mud pill palace. The surroundings of the cave had become clear, and the vegetation, which was originally only 3 miles away, had now covered the entire area around the cave. The cave didn't change much and was still constantly emitting chaotic power. However, this chaotic power no longer had the chance to spread out in all directions, but instead, it was flowing into Luo Fan's body. After 1,000 years, Luo Fan's body had grown twice as big as it was 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago, Luo Fan's body was only 3 meters long and 2 meters tall, but now he was 6 meters long and 4 meters tall. And in his body, the chaotic power circulation route had gradually evolved from the original hundreds of circulation routes into one. This circulation route was 1,000 times more mysterious than the previous hundreds of circulation routes, and it contained all the advantages of the previous hundreds of circulation routes. The chaotic power that was refined had become a completely different, but incomparably mysterious energy and was crazily flowing into his mud pill palace. At this moment, what Luo Fan saw was still the unimaginably tall Buzhou Mountain. He was still in the state where he was one with the earth and the sky, and he was still the embodiment of Buzhou Mountain. To him, 1,000 years had passed in a flash. This cave wasn't big, and it didn't contain much chaotic power. When Luo Fan was observing Buzhou Mountain and comprehending the cultivation method, the chaotic power he absorbed was at least 1,000 times faster than what he emitted. After 1,000 years of absorption, this cave could no longer withstand it. Finally, on this day, the ground around the cave shook violently, and a large mass of chaotic power, which had turned black because of its density, suddenly rushed out from the cave and rushed toward Luo Fan. Boom! A thunderous roar resounded, and the mass of primal chaos energy blasted into Luo Fan's abdomen without any hindrance. Chapter 3. After emerging from a state where he had transformed into Buzhou Mountain and became one with the world, Luo Fan did not have the time to observe the changes in his body. He instinctively activated the mysterious circulation that had been formed for thousands of years, and tried his best to absorb the enormous amount of chaotic energy that had erupted from his abdomen. This primal chaos energy seemed to have erupted all the primal chaos energy in the entire crypt in an instant, bursting out with an extremely powerful impact force. In an instant, Luo Fan's entire body was blasted off the ground. Then, it instantly enveloped his entire body, causing his originally clear figure to be enveloped by a thicker, dusky fog. Although the circulation that had been formed for thousands of years was extremely mysterious and had a shocking ability to absorb chaotic energy, there was still a limit to its absorption ability. At this moment, the chaotic energy that had been accumulated in the cave had erupted in an instant. The amount that had erupted was tens of thousands of times greater than normal. It was not something that any cultivation method could absorb in an instant. At this moment, Luo Fan instinctively felt that something was wrong. He tried his best to activate the mysterious circulation that seemed very strange to him, but also incomparably familiar. It crazily engulfed the surrounding chaotic energy. He felt waves of intense pain all over his body. The speed at which the chaotic energy surged into his body was faster than the speed at which he could transform it. He gradually felt as if his entire body was stuffed with an object that was far larger than his body size, and he could explode into countless pieces at any time. This was the cave's final counterattack. It was also the essence of all the chaotic energy contained in the cave. If Luo Fan could completely absorb it, his strength would improve greatly. If he could not, he would explode from the endless chaotic energy essence, turn into countless pieces, and disappear from the world. The intense pain became more and more intense, and the feeling of being bloated and about to explode became more and more obvious. A sudden fear surged in Luo Fan's heart, a fear that his life was about to disappear. The moment this fear arose, he suddenly felt that his perception of his surroundings had become unprecedentedly clear. The vast and unyielding aura that had been emitted from Buzhou Mountain instantly surged into his soul. Buzhou Mountain, the spine of Pangu, the primordial heavenly pillar. It was indomitable. If it didn't collapse, the sky would collapse. If it didn't break, the earth would sink. When this enlightenment appeared, a feeling of being connected to the entire primordial world rose in his heart. He naturally entered a state that was similar to the one he had entered for 1,000 years, but was also subtly different from the one he had entered in the past 1,000 years. This state was mysterious and indescribable. As he entered this state, the mysterious circulation speed in his body suddenly increased by 100 times, 1,000 times. The last bit of chaotic energy that burst out from the crypt was absorbed at an incomparably fast speed, flowing into the Naiwan Palace between his eyebrows without any waste. The feeling that his body was about to explode completely disappeared. This process lasted for a day and a night. After a day and a night, the chaotic energy that was originally so thick that it had tightly wrapped around his body had completely disappeared. It had all been absorbed and transformed by him. The surroundings of the cave were clear, and the world was clear. Luo Fan's body shook slightly, and he woke up from that mysterious and indescribable state. His body slowly descended to the ground, and he slowly opened his eyes. Although only a day and a night had passed, he felt that it was even longer than the previous 1,000 years, as if a lifetime had passed. Why did the chaotic energy disappear? Luo Fan looked around, then looked down and murmured. Suddenly, a wave of enlightenment surged in his heart. So, 1,000 years have passed unknowingly. He looked at his body. His 9 meters long and 6 meters tall body was like a giant, and it was at least 2 times bigger than 1,000 years ago. With a thought, the situation within 100 miles of his surroundings appeared in his mind. Every blade of grass, every tree, every mountain, and every rock was extremely clear and meticulous. Moreover, there were no blind spots. Carefully examining the scene within 100 miles, an indescribable sense of satisfaction filled Luo Fan's heart. Dispelling this feeling, he withdrew his will, and in the blink of an eye, he had already entered the spirit in his body, which was the inside of the little Pai Shio's body. Through the little Pai Shio's perspective, he could only see that the spherical area that was originally only a meter in diameter had now expanded 100 times, becoming a spherical area with a diameter of 100 meters. Outside this spherical region, it was still gray and hazy, as if it was in a state of chaos. And in this spherical area, Yang's little Pishio had also grown 100 times bigger. From its original fist-size size, it had become 6 to 7 meters long and 3 to 4 meters tall. However, it was almost the same size as the Luo Fan from a day and a night ago. Moreover, the originally chaotic and somewhat transparent body had now completely turned into a grayish state, as if it was a physical existence. It was no longer translucent and looked like a real body of flesh and blood, vivid and lifelike. As his will entered the little Pai Shio's body, he suddenly felt an incomparably powerful feeling that he could tear everything apart. Obviously, compared to 1,000 years ago, this spirit was who knows how many times stronger. This is the Niwen Palace, which is also the so-called Sea of Consciousness. Luo Fan very easily and contentedly wandered in this spherical space with a diameter of 100 meters for a while. In his heart, he had a burst of understanding about where he was. When this understanding appeared, he suddenly felt that his will was suddenly dragged by an incomparably powerful force, instantly separated from his own spirit and enveloped his entire body. The internal situation of this dragon-headed, horse-bodied, unicorn-legged body appeared in his perception without any omission. So the inside of my body is like this. I've opened my eyes. There was no panic in Luo Fan's heart, because the intuition in the depths of his heart told him that this kind of change did not pose any danger to him. This was the first time that Luo Fan had directly seen the internal situation of the Pai Shio's body, this legendary creature's body. That mysterious aspect was far beyond his imagination. Although this Pai Shio also had internal organs, meridians, innumerable blood vessels and muscles, but all kinds of situations were completely different from what he had seen before. The structure and connection of these various organs, compared to the human organs, were even more ingenious, even more wonderful. Just by comparing the position and structure of these organs with the human body structure diagrams that he had seen on Earth, he did not even need to think hard to understand. He knew that this body was even more advanced than the human body, and even more exquisite. Just by comparing the positions, he had even already thought of 4 or 5 ways to modify the human body, to make it more powerful, to work more efficiently. Shaking his head, his will separated from the delicate structure of the various organs, he concentrated his will on the energy circulation in his body. At this moment, he discovered the results of his efforts in the past 1,000 years. That incomparably mysterious energy circulation route entered his mind. With a thought, a stream of mysterious energy flowed out of his mud-pill palace and began to circulate around the energy circulation route. As this energy moved forward, countless words and images suddenly burst out from the depths of his mind. After the energy had revolved one round and returned to the Niwen Palace, these countless words and images intertwined with each other, merging into a profound and abstruse magic formula that was incomparably familiar to him, and he had completely understood and comprehended it. This magic formula did not have any name, and its effect was even more complicated and profound. Although he had completely understood and comprehended this magic formula, before he had completely mastered this magic formula, he had no way of knowing what the highest realm of this magic formula was. Currently, he only had a very small understanding of this magic formula, among which the most profound understanding was the super strong ability to absorb and transform the chaotic energy. What are these words? What Luo Fan cared about the most was not the effect of this magic formula, but the words that suddenly burst out from the depths of his mind. These words were obviously not any of the words that he had ever learned, nor any of the words that he knew. They were not simplified Chinese characters, not traditional Chinese characters, not small seal characters, large seal characters, clerical script, oracle bone script, and so on. As for some foreign language, it was even more impossible. This kind of writing was very mysterious. Every word was like a picture that described some kind of great Tao of heaven and earth. The subtle and profound parts of it made Luo Fan feel that it contained countless things that could be excavated with just a glance. These were definitely not words that the Pishio had ever learned or inherited. This was something that Luo Fan was very sure of. And naturally, these words could not be the various kinds of words that Luo Fan had learned on Earth. This was something that he was very sure of. But these words suddenly burst out from the depths of his mind. This was really worth pondering. Chapter 4. Although he knew that the fact that these words had burst out from the depths of his mind was worth pondering, with Luo Fan's shallow knowledge, he could only attribute this to the special nature of the primordial world to explain this fact. Without the primordial chi of chaos, the crypt had become a dark, bottomless, ordinary crypt with nothing special about it. Around the crypt, the vegetation that could not get too close due to the dense primordial chi of chaos had also spread. Now, it had spread to a radius of 1 meter from the side of the crypt, leaving only a circular area with a radius of 1 meter. Luo Fan tossed the question of why these strange words had appeared to the back of his mind, and carefully recalled the entire incantation. This incantation was profound and difficult to understand, but it had appeared because of Luo Fan's 1,000 years of understanding. He could completely understand it, and could even comprehend the mysteries it contained. A mysterious energy slowly flowed out from his Niwen palace and began to circulate in his body along with the incantation. As the energy circulated in his body seemed to have become a huge black hole, crazily absorbing the endless primordial chi of chaos around him. A strong suction force appeared out of nowhere, and the surrounding primordial chi of chaos surged towards him. An increasingly large whirlpool gradually wrapped around his dragon-headed, horse-bodied, and unicorn-legged body. As time passed, the whirlpool's area of influence grew larger and gradually affected the entire valley where the crypt was located. Pai pai, boom, poo, kacha. The primordial chi rubbed against the ground, the vegetation, and the mountain rocks, producing all sorts of strange sounds. As the incantation circulated, more and more primordial chi of chaos surged into Luo Fan's body. After the primordial chi entered his body, it rushed straight into his meridians and was instantly dispersed by the mysterious energy circulating in his meridians before merging into his body. However, compared to the mysterious energy in his meridians, the quality of the primordial chi that surged in from the outside world was far too poor. Tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of portions of Xiantian Yuan Qi could only be refined into one portion of energy. The speed at which the innate Yuan Qi was gushing into his body was so fast that it could form a huge whirlpool around his body. However, he still felt extremely empty and powerless. He felt that the amount of innate Yuan Qi was like a drop in a bucket. It couldn't satisfy him at all. Not enough. Not enough. This is far from enough. This thought became clearer and clearer in his mind. As he thought of this, the vortex around his body continued to expand, and the area it affected also became wider and wider. At first, it was only the area around the cave, which was 3 miles. Then it expanded to 5 miles. Then it expanded to 5 miles. Then 100 miles. Then 1,000 miles. By the time the sphere of influence had expanded to a radius of 3,000 miles, those innate energies had already gathered around Luo Fan's body, turning into a liquid state that looked like flowing water. These streams of natural power kept gushing into Luo Fan's acupoints like flowing water, joining the mysterious energy cycle inside his body. They were broken up and mixed together. However, that feeling of emptiness, that powerless feeling, was getting stronger and stronger, more and more obvious. Gradually, he couldn't stand it anymore. After half a day, when almost all the innate Yuan Qi within a radius of 3,000 miles had been absorbed, the mysterious energy in Luo Fan's body had only increased by a tiny amount, which was 10 times smaller than a strand of hair. This kind of efficiency could be said to be extremely poor. It seems that without that kind of chaotic energy, I can't continue practicing this cultivation technique. Luo Fan thought helplessly. Slowly, he withdrew the mysterious energy back into his Niwen palace. The unimaginably strong suction force gradually faded away, and the whirlpool that had formed around his body, which affected a radius of 3,000 miles, also slowly faded away. Puff! A soft sound was heard. Under the strong suction force from Luo Fan's body, the liquid innate energy that had gathered around his body like flowing water suddenly expanded. Its volume suddenly increased by 1,000 times and exploded in all directions with a strong impact force. Along with this explosion, the sand, stones, and other debris that had gathered around Luo Fan's body, along with the innate energy, were blasted away by the impact force. When the innate energy calmed down, the valley looked like it had been bombed by an atomic bomb. A crater that occupied the entire area of the valley had appeared, and even the ground had been shaved off by a layer. I need to find another place with chaotic energy to cultivate, or else my cultivation speed will be too slow. Luo Fan looked around and thought to himself. As he thought about this, his eyes couldn't help but look at the indescribably lofty Buzhou Mountain in front of him. Of course, he didn't need to think about the direction he should go. Was there any better direction than the Buzhou Mountain? With a thought in his mind, a few mysterious waves flashed under Luo Fan's feet. Then four auspicious clouds appeared under his feet out of nowhere, lifted his body up, and slowly lifted him up. This was the innate talent of the Pishio. Born by the heaven and earth, the innate gods without parents all had all kinds of special abilities. Each ability was different from other innate gods, but there was one ability that almost all innate gods had in common, and that was the ability to fly. It was the first time for Luo Fan to fly, but he had a wonderful feeling. He didn't feel strange at all, nor did he panic. Instead, he just felt comfortable and satisfied. Feeling all kinds of comfort and contentment, Luo Fan couldn't help but let out a long roar. He stretched out his limbs, stepped on the void, and ran diagonally upward. The auspicious clouds under his feet automatically dispersed when he lifted his feet. When his feet landed on a new place again, another auspicious cloud appeared under his feet out of nowhere, supporting his feet. In this way, he kept going up, and the auspicious clouds kept disappearing and appearing, making him run in the void as if he were running on flat ground. His posture was free and elegant, as if all the harsh environment had no difference to him. Running in this kind of elegant posture, the more he ran, the more relaxed he felt. The more he ran, the more carefree he felt. So his running speed naturally became faster and faster. In the end, he crossed 100 miles with one step and another 100 miles with another step. In just a short while, he had already reached the sky above 10,000 miles. The sky of the untainted land was many times higher than the sky of the earth. Only when he was 10,000 miles away from the ground did he come into contact with the clouds at the bottom. Looking up, the sky was still extremely deep, and he didn't know how high it was. After running recklessly for a long time, Luo Fan finally stopped, satisfied. He looked around, identified his position and the direction he was heading, and began to run quickly in the direction of Buzhou Mountain. His figure flashed across the sky, as if he had turned into a grayish-white lightning bolt, forming a white light mark in the sky above 10,000 miles. Buzhou Mountain was so high that one couldn't see its peak. Looking in the direction of Buzhou Mountain from 10,000 miles above, one could only see a part of the mountain whose bottom and top couldn't be seen. If one wanted to find Buzhou Mountain, he definitely wouldn't be wrong. The chaotic energy was a kind of energy that appeared in the world before the innate energy. Even if one was far above the sky, one would definitely be able to discover the difference where there was chaotic vitality. This was because chaotic vitality had chaotic attributes, so it would naturally emit chaotic aura. The more powerful the source of chaotic vitality, the more powerful the chaotic aura. However, 10,000 miles was not enough to block this chaotic aura. Therefore, Luo Fan didn't need to worry that he would miss the chaotic vitality while rushing. During the process of rushing, Luo Fan finally had a direct understanding of the vastness of the untainted world. Running towards Buzhou Mountain at lightning speed for 3 years, Luo Fan finally found a place that emitted chaotic vitality. In these 3 years, the distance that Luo Fan had traveled was probably no less than 10 million miles. Even so, every time he raised his head to look at Buzhou Mountain didn't seem much different from when he first started. In fact, he couldn't even see that it had grown a little bigger. The comfort and contentment that he had felt when he had just flown had disappeared during these 3 years. Now, he had long regarded flying as a form of walking, just like when he was a human on Earth. Walking continuously for 3 years, that feeling was obviously not very pleasant. I finally found it. The chaotic aura in front of Luo Fan was overjoyed. Chapter 5. After 120 years, Luo Fan regretfully looked back at the cave that he had stayed in for 120 years. Clouds appeared under his feet and lifted his body up. Not long after, he reached a height of 10,000 miles. He suddenly accelerated and turned into a gray light, flying towards Buzhou Mountain. The cave that Luo Fan regretfully looked back at was the place that he had sensed 120 years ago when he was 10,000 miles high in the sky. The chaotic energy was several times denser than when he had first arrived in this world. Although the chaotic energy in this cave was several times denser than the chaotic energy in the cave, his ability to absorb the chaotic energy after activating the nameless cultivation method was 100 times stronger than when he was in the cave. Therefore, he only spent 120 years to completely absorb the chaotic energy in this cave. Is the cultivation method that I've comprehended too abnormal? Luo Fan thought helplessly as he flew quickly in the sky. The reason why he sighed was because after he had completely absorbed all the chaotic energy in the cave, the mysterious energy in his body had only doubled, from the thickness of a chopstick to the thickness of a little finger. Compared to the meridians that were the size of a Pichot's bowl, the kind of bowl that people use to store soup in families, the energy that was the thickness of a little finger only took up about 1% of the volume. According to the requirements of the cultivation method that he had comprehended, his first step of cultivation must wait for the energy to completely fill his meridians. Then, under some kind of subtle opportunity, some kind of mysterious change would occur. Only then would he be considered to have completed this step of cultivation. Even though he himself, who had comprehended this cultivation method, did not know what the opportunity and the change were. But if he wanted to improve his strength, this was an inevitable process. I still need 99%. Doesn't that mean that I have to find hundreds of chaotic energy sources of this scale to obtain enough energy? Luo Fan suddenly felt that the road ahead of him was long. Of course, this might just be his greed. In fact, in these 120 years, Luo Fan had made great progress. On the surface, his body had already expanded to its limit, maintaining a length of 9 meters and a height of 6 meters. But on the inside, the strength of his body had more than doubled compared to 120 years ago. At the same time, the sea of consciousness opened up in his Niwen Palace had already expanded to a spherical area with a diameter of 200 meters. His divine soul had also expanded to the same size as his body, on the basis of solidification. At this moment, if he released his spirit and placed it together with his body, no one would be able to tell the difference between the spirit and the body after ignoring Yen Sei. This was enough to prove that Luo Fan's cultivation was on the right track. As long as he had more and more chaos origin energy, his strength would increase steadily. What is that opportunity? Did I really come up with this technique on my own? Luo Fan was lying in the grayish chaotic energy, and his eyes were filled with annoyance. After that, 30,000 years had passed. In these 30,000 years, Luo Fan's journey wasn't very long. Only about 1 billion miles. He spent most of his time on the primal chaos origin chi sources one after another. In these 30,000 years, he had absorbed more than 200 chaotic energy sources. He had to spend at least 100 years to absorb each chaotic energy source, and only after he had absorbed all the chaotic energy source did he move to another place. In total, the time he had spent on his journey was only about 10,000 years. The closer he got to Buzhou Mountain, the more chaotic energy sources there were. At the same time, each chaotic energy source contained more chaotic energy. After absorbing more than 200 primal chi sources that were constantly releasing primal chi, the mysterious energy in Luo Fan's body had already filled all the meridians in his body. When he activated the nameless technique, the meridians in his body, which were the size of bowls, were completely filled with the mysterious energy, without any gaps. In these 30,000 years, the sea of consciousness in his mud pill palace had expanded to a sphere with a diameter of 490 miles. The spirit in his sea of consciousness had also strengthened to a limit. Although it did not look much different from before, except that it was more condensed. Its structure was hundreds of times stronger than before. It was even as strong as his body, which had been tempered by endless chaotic energy. These changes were originally a good thing. However, he found that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't absorb even a little bit of chaos yuan qi. Even the innate yuan qi couldn't enter his body through his acupoints. No matter how hard he tried, his sea of consciousness showed no signs of expanding. His spirit could not be strengthened no matter how hard he tried. In other words, Luo Fan's cultivation had reached a bottleneck. Opportunity. What kind of opportunity is it? Only by finding that opportunity can some kind of change happen, and only by that change can I continue to improve. What is it? What am I lacking? Luo Fan frowned, and the irritation in his eyes became more intense. As an immortal innate god, he had endless time, and 30,000 years was nothing at all. However, don't forget where Luo Fan came from. On the Earth in the 21st century, the pace of life was so fast that it was necessary to count time in seconds. Luo Fan, who grew up in such a society, could not live 30,000 years as a day like the native innate gods in the untainted world. In such a long period of 30,000 years, he had worked hard to travel across the land of about 1 billion miles and had wasted more than 200 chaotic energy sources. Finally, he had cultivated to this level, but he was finally stuck at such a bottleneck. How could he not be irritable? At this time, Luo Fan was less than 10 million miles away from Buzhou Mountain. The originally blurry Mount Buzhou in his eyes had now become incomparably clear. Looking ahead, the Buzhou Mountain had been 100 times larger than before. Although it was 10 million miles away, it looked quite large. Not to mention its height, just its size alone was already like a wall. Similarly, the vast and unyielding aura emanating from Buzhou Mountain had become more intense. However, as mentioned before, one would not feel its fragrance after entering the room of orchids for a long time. After being enveloped by this aura for so long, Luo Fan had gradually taken it for granted, and he would even ignore it under normal circumstances. Lying there, the more he thought about it, the more irritated he became. Luo Fan suddenly looked up to the sky and let out a loud roar. His voice was like thunder, and it suddenly exploded, shaking the surrounding chaotic energy and causing it to tumble violently. With a slight push from his four limbs, the mountain that was hundreds of miles in area and tens of thousands of feet in height, under his feet with a loud rumble from top to bottom, the entire mountain, as if it was made of tofu, was turned into dust. Under the impact of the chaotic yuan qi that was constantly gushing out, the dust flew in all directions, raising a huge cloud of smoke that filled the sky and completely enveloped the land within a radius of more than 200 miles. This scene, accompanied by Luo Fan's thunderous roar, formed an earth-shattering momentum. Then, four auspicious clouds appeared under Luo Fan's 4 feet. They carried his body, transforming into a grayish-white light that shot into the sky. In the blink of an eye, he was already 10,000 miles up in the sky. Roar! Although he had vented his anger when he destroyed the mountain, the irritation in his heart had not dissipated by much. He was still unable to calm down after arriving in the sky. He opened his throat and let out an endless roar. As he roared, his eyes flashed. He saw the wall in front of him, and he could not see the top of the Buzhou Mountain. In that instant, it was as if a bolt of lightning had flashed across his mind. Chapter 6. Now that he knew that his breakthrough opportunity was Buzhou Mountain, the agitation in Luo Fan's heart instantly dissipated. He raised his head to look at Buzhou Mountain. The vast and unyielding spirit that he had ignored because he had been shrouded in it for too long gradually appeared in his senses. Compared with ordinary people who could not detect things that they were used to without comparison, as an innate god, Luo Fan's senses were sharper. As long as he noticed it, he could sense that spirit again. As he sensed the vast and unyielding aura, the irritation he felt because he had reached a bottleneck and was unable to break through began to fade away. In the end, it completely disappeared. The only thing left in his heart was the will to fight against the heavens, to fight against the earth, to never give up, and to never give up. Phew! Luo Fan closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and exhaled. Two streams of white mist rolled out of his nostrils and did not gradually dissipate until they reached 100 meters away. When he opened his eyes again, they were clear. Only in the depths of his eyes, occasionally revealed a little will to never yield and never give up. Buzhou Mountain was the backbone of Pangu, the northwest pillar of heaven, towering between heaven and earth. Its height was indescribable, and it could be seen from billions of miles away. For 30,000 years, every time Luo Fan raised his head to confirm the direction he was heading, he would see the northwest pillar of heaven, Buzhou Mountain. Therefore, he was very familiar with the shape of Buzhou Mountain. Obviously, for something that he was so familiar with, no matter how he observed it or tried to comprehend it, it would be difficult for him to get a new understanding from it, let alone the opportunity for him to make a breakthrough. Luo Fan floated in the sky, thousands of miles above the ground, staring at Buzhou Mountain in the distance, trying hard to blend into the vast and unyielding spirit emitted by Buzhou Mountain. Of course, after a long time, he did not comprehend anything. Buzhou Mountain was still Buzhou Mountain, and he was still himself. At this moment, he was comprehending the vast and unyielding aura released by Buzhou Mountain. His heart was filled with the idea of never giving up and never giving up. Naturally, he would not give up so easily. When he realized that this angle was already too familiar to him and that it was hard for him to comprehend anything, he slowly raised his head. His gaze moved along the mountain of Buzhou Mountain and slowly moved upwards, searching for the peak of Buzhou Mountain. With Luo Fan's current eyesight, it was naturally not a problem for him to clearly see through a few layers of clouds. However, Buzhou Mountain was too high. Even if he tried his best to see through hundreds of layers of clouds, he could only see a part of the mountain whose top could not be seen. With a flicker of his mind, he took a step forward. The four auspicious clouds under his feet suddenly generated a tremendous force, turning his body into a gray beam of light, piercing through the layers of clouds and shooting up. Even though it had been 30,000 years since he came to this world, Luo Fan still had no idea how high the sky of untainted land was. Although he was flying at a high altitude, he could not fly too far away from the ground because he had to pay attention to the source of chaotic vitality below. Therefore, when he was hurrying, he was only 10,000 miles above the ground. Obviously, there was still a long distance between this height and the real sky. In the hollow, Luo Fan seemed to be stepping on invisible stairs, rushing up at an extremely fast speed. His figure became faster and faster, and he was getting further and further away from the ground. In this process, he broke through layer after layer of clouds, leaving a hole that seemed to have been drilled open among the layers of clouds. Not long after, his figure had rushed to a height of 90,000 miles above the ground. When he reached a height of 90,000 miles above the ground, Luo Fan had to stop rushing up. This was because there was no longer a path above 90,000 miles. Here, there was a boundlessly vast blue canopy that covered the entire untainted world and the entire sky of the untainted world. It was earth-shattering and earth-shattering. That was the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer in the sky of the entire untainted land. Looking ahead, although Buzhou Mountain had shrunk several times, it still had not reached the top. Instead, it was like a sharp sword, piercing into the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer. I haven't reached the top yet. Luo Fan could not help but sigh in his heart. The height of Buzhou Mountain was once again beyond his expectation. 90,000 miles. It should be known that his current position was 90,000 miles above the ground. The highest peak on Earth, Mount Everest, was only over 8,800 meters high, which was less than 3,000 feet and less than 20 miles. This was already an insurmountable mountain in the eyes of ordinary people. However, this Buzhou Mountain was so high that he could not see its top even after flying for 90,000 miles. This comparison showed how incredible the height of Buzhou Mountain was. However, only this height could serve as the heavenly pillar of the Northwest. Above him was a boundless blue sky, and below him was a vast expanse of white, incomparably vast clouds. Being sandwiched in the middle, a feeling of freedom and elegance emerged in his heart. Since I've already risen, I must see the top of Bujo Mountain. Luo Fan made up his mind. He raised his head and looked up at the calm, dark blue layer of astral wind, thunder, and fire layer. His eyes were filled with a firm determination. With a thought, a mysterious energy rushed out from his mud-pill palace, covering every inch of his meridians. Then, the 4 auspicious clouds under his feet suddenly burst out, and a powerful force lifted his body up, pushing him into the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer above him. His entry was like a drop of water falling into a pot of boiling oil. In an instant, the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer reacted violently. Countless Yin thunders, Yang thunders with divine thunders, earth divine thunders, and all sorts of heavenly thunders and divine thunders struck down on his body. Countless Samadhi divine winds, heavenly winds, Yin winds, ghost winds, and all sorts of other evil winds came assaulting his body. At the same time, countless heavenly fires, earth fires, stone fires, wood fires, and all sorts of other divine fires burned on his body. In just a blink of an eye, the calm astral wind, thunder, and fire layer within a circumference of 100 miles became incomparably violent. Countless types of energy, which were originally silent and flowing slowly, were stimulated, bursting out with a dreadful destructive force. Cold, hot, sour, numb, painful, itchy, all sorts of indescribable and indescribable strange sensations came from every part of his body. Under the bombardment of all sorts of thunders, the evil winds, and the burning of countless divine fires, his body was severely damaged. In just a blink of an eye, his skin was torn and his flesh was torn, and his body was charred black. It's actually so powerful. Luo Fan was shocked in his heart. He tried his best to circulate the mysterious energy in his body according to the nameless cultivation technique he learned. As the energy circulated, all the wounds on his body healed quickly, and new flesh grew out from the wounds, repairing his body. In terms of toughness, the newly grown flesh was even slightly stronger than his old flesh. However, very quickly, the newly grown flesh was once again damaged by the various heavenly thunders, divine thunders, evil winds, and divine fires. His skin was torn, and his flesh was torn, and his body was charred black once again. It can actually strengthen my fleshly body. Luo Fan did not panic at all. Instead, he was very happy. Although all sorts of indescribable and indescribable strange sensations were coming from every part of his body, they were nothing compared to the improvement of his fleshly body, which had stagnated for a very long time. Chapter 7. The astral wind, lightning, and fire layer was a very mysterious and profound place. The reason why the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer was named this way was because of the various special energies it contained. Astral wind was a general term that represented Samadhi divine wind, heavenly wind, Yin wind, ghost wind, and other kinds of evil winds. Lightning represented Yin lightning, Yang lightning, wood lightning, earth lightning, and other kinds of heavenly lightning and divine lightning. Fire represented heavenly fire, earth fire, stone fire, wood fire, and other kinds of divine flames that were different from ordinary flames. The wind, lightning, and fire in the astral wind, lightning, and fire all had a very mysterious connection. Thus, in the sky of the great desolate world, they were able to condense into one in a very subtle balance. This balance was very subtle, very stable, and also very fragile. Normally, when there was no stimulation, even if tens of millions of years passed, the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer would not change at all. The balance would not be broken. But as long as any impurities entered, this balance would be broken in an instant. The originally calm astral wind, lightning, and fire layer would instantly erupt with unimaginable destructive power, attacking all the impurities that entered until they turned into nothingness or were expelled. Looking up from below, the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer was dark blue, covering the entire sky. But after entering, it was like entering another world, filled with incomparably rich colors. As long as it could be found in the world, it could definitely be found here. The millions of colors interweaved together, appearing incomparably gorgeous, but also revealing an incomparable danger. Compared to the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer, Luo-Fan was naturally a kind of impurity. When he entered, he instantly broke the subtle and fragile balance of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer, instantly causing a great disturbance in the area of 100 miles around him. All the astral wind, lightning, and fire within 100 miles were like sharks that smelled blood, fiercely pouncing towards his body. In the process, they exploded with their most powerful attack power. It seemed like the entire astral wind, lightning, and fire layer had a spirit of its own, wanting to completely destroy and expel all the impurities that had invaded his body. Luo-Fan's body had already become very tough after being refined by the chaotic Yuan Qi, but the destructive power of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer was even more powerful. Under the bombardment, his body was unable to remain unscathed. Under the bombardment of countless brutal energies, every part of his body suffered all kinds of strange injuries. Countless pieces of flesh were constantly torn off from his body under the bombardment of wind, lightning, and fire. Countless strange injuries appeared on his body. But at the same time, the mysterious energy in his body had unimaginable power, and it had an incomparably powerful regenerative ability. When his body was suffering from unimaginable injuries such as astral winds, lightning, and fire, he would be able to react immediately and remove those injuries, allowing his flesh and blood to grow back and his body to return to normal. Moreover, every time his body was healed, the injured part of his body would become slightly stronger than before. The astral wind, lightning, and fire were endless, and the damage they could inflict was also endless. Naturally, the mysterious energy was also endless for the body's recovery. Naturally, there was no end to the increase in the strength of his body. Therefore, the endless attacks of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer had actually helped him to strengthen his body. At the moment, all kinds of indescribable pain could be sensed from every part of Luo-Fan's body, but his heart was overjoyed. He was in pain and happiness at the same time. Of course, he didn't forget to observe Buzhou Mountain in the front. Buzhou Mountain was the pillar of the northwest sky, the backbone of Pangu. In this layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire layer, it was incomparably eye-catching, even more eye-catching than when it was outside the layer. Because of Luo-Fan's entry, all kinds of strange scenes were generated in this layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire layer, blocking some people's sight. But to Luo-Fan, who had a super strong eyesight, this kind of obstruction wasn't a big problem. Gazing into the distance, he could still see Buzhou Mountain tens of thousands of miles away. The higher he went, the smaller the mountain became. His body was being tempered by countless astral wind, lightning, and fire layers. But Luo-Fan didn't forget his original intention. While his body was being tempered, he was still flying upwards. As he kept moving upwards, all kinds of astral wind, lightning, and fire layers, which had been attacking his body, grew stronger and stronger. At first, when he just entered the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire layers, the rate at which his body was damaged was far slower than the recovery speed of the mysterious energy. Every time his body was damaged, it would be healed in a moment, and his body would be strengthened slightly. But later on, the intensity of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layers kept increasing, and naturally, the damage to his body kept increasing as well. Unavoidably, the recovery speed of the mysterious energy inside his body began slowing down. Of course, every time his body was healed, his body would be strengthened more and more as well. Luo-Fan thought that the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire would always be like this, and that the intensity of the energy might grow stronger as he went deeper. But when he reached 1,000 miles into the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire, the situation changed. The speed at which Luo Fan advanced in the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire layers kept slowing down. By the time he reached 1,000 miles into the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire, more than half a year had passed. At the place where he reached 1,000 miles into the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire, there was a clear gap separating the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire from the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire. The feeling it gave people was that the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire 1,000 miles below was one world, and the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire 1,000 miles above was another world. After being tempered in the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire, Luo Fan's body was twice as strong as before. But at this point, the recovery speed of the mysterious energy inside Luo Fan's body had already reached a level comparable to the bombardment of the surrounding energy. Every time his body was damaged by the bombardment, it would take a long time for him to recover. And after he recovered, the injury would be damaged again, and it would take another period of time to recover, and then it would be damaged again. This cycle of damage, recovery, and damage continued. Looking at the recovery speed, it could be imagined that if the bombardment was a little stronger, the recovery speed of the mysterious energy inside his body would not be able to keep up. At that time, it was likely that the astral wind, lightning, and fire would not be helping him to refine his body, but killing him. Looking at the gap of 1,000 miles in the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire, he could imagine that if he went further up, there would definitely be a fundamental change in the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire. After weighing it for a while, Luo Fan very rationally decided to stop here and wait until his body was strong enough to withstand even stronger astral wind, lightning, and fire before going further up. With this kind of decision, Luo Fan's mood calmed down and his body did not go further up. Just like that, he stopped at the depth of 1,000 miles in the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire. Stretching his body, he stood on 4 auspicious clouds and quietly endured the bombardment of the various lightning, wind, and fire. This time, he stopped for 100 years. During this 100 years, Luo Fan's body did not move at all. He only stared at Buzhou Mountain, which was thousands of miles in front of him. He opened up his mind and comprehended the boundless and unyielding aura that Buzhou Mountain gave off. While he was refining his body, he also wanted to see if he had the opportunity to comprehend an opportunity from Buzhou Mountain to make a breakthrough. Even though he had already penetrated thousands of miles into the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire, he still had not reached the top of Buzhou Mountain. Looking at it from here, it was still just a part of the mountain where the top could not be seen. For Luo Fan's mind, which had already become numb, there was no special stimulation to it. Therefore, even after 100 years, his improvement was still extremely limited. It was even reasonable to say that he had not made any progress at all. Chapter 8. Luo Fan's body had also been greatly tempered in the past 100 years. The strength of his body had already doubled from 100 years ago. In other words, it had reached 4 times the strength before he entered the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer. With the strength of his body at this level, the astral wind, thunder, and fire thousands of miles into the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer no longer posed any threat to him. He floated in the depths of the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer. The endless astral wind, thunder, and fire around him bombarded his body. It was like a river crashing against a riverbank. No matter how many there were, they would only be smashed and rolled back into the surroundings. However, they could not leave any damage on his body at all. This situation had been going on for a few months. This time, Luo Fan, who felt no pain or discomfort in his body, finally knew that he had completely adapted to this level of astral wind, thunder, and fire. If he continued to stay here, his body would not be tempered at all. In other words, he could go even higher. Understanding this, Luo Fan raised his head and looked up. His eyes revealed a bit of expectation. What kind of world would it be after crossing this thin line? Would it be an even more powerful astral wind, thunder, and fire? Thinking of this, he filled all the meridians in his body with the mysterious energy in his body, making the best defense for his body. Then his limbs moved. In the void, as if he was stepping on invisible stairs, he slowly stepped up. In his opinion, no matter what happened above this line, it would certainly be more violent than the 1,000-mile line below. Because of this, he was prepared. However, he did not expect that when he braced himself to withstand the brutal energy bombardment, he only felt his body become empty. The endless astral wind, thunder, and fire that had been bombarding his body for the past 100 years instantly disappeared. It made him feel as if he had left the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer and returned to the primitive world below, relaxed and free. This is incredible. Luo Fan looked around, his eyes revealing a kind of inconceivable emotion, because he saw that the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer above was surprisingly empty. The space that should have been filled with endless astral winds, lightning, and fire was actually only sparsely filled with a few cloud-like existences of various colors. They were extremely gorgeous. Apart from these colorful clouds, the other areas were similar to a vacuum. They didn't look like the dangerous and unpredictable astral wind, thunder, and fire layer at all. Instead, they looked like the fairyland of legends. Danger! Just as Luo Fan was sighing, a premonition emerged in his heart. Following the signs, less than a kilometer away from him, he saw a fiery red cloud mixed with a bit of blue and purple. After Luo Fan appeared, this cloud seemed to be pulled by some kind of force and quickly rushed towards Luo Fan. In the time it took for Luo Fan to sigh, it had already rushed to Luo Fan's side. Woo-woo! A strange cry entered Luo Fan's ears, as if countless evil spirits were howling in his ears. Luo Fan wanted to see what this red cloud with a bit of blue and purple was going to do. He didn't dodge, and his whole body just crashed into it. It's like jelly. This was Luo Fan's first thought. So hot. So numb. This was his second thought. When his body rushed into the cloud, it didn't look like an ordinary cloud. In fact, it didn't even look like a cloud at all. Instead, it looked like a jelly-like life form. Its surface was somewhat flexible, and it had a bit of resistance against him. After entering, he discovered that this wasn't a cloud at all. This was an existence formed by the highly condensed fire and thunder. After Luo Fan entered, this originally condensed and calm cloud erupted with an unimaginable destructive power. His body, which could withstand endless attacks without suffering any damage in the depths of the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer, was instantly scorched black. In the next instant, 1% of his flesh and blood was separated from his body. Luo Fan was shocked, and he knew that he had been rash. He hurriedly circulated the mysterious energy in his body at high speed, and in the blink of an eye, his body had cycled through 80 great circulations. As this mysterious energy circulated at a high speed, the injuries on his body quickly healed. However, the speed of destruction was several times faster than the speed of recovery. With his current recovery ability, it was impossible for him to keep up with the speed of destruction. If he continued to stay here, the only ending that awaited him would be death. Luo Fan's heart trembled. He had already understood what the premonition of danger in his heart represented. Although there was some regret in his heart, it was more of an unyielding feeling. In this critical situation, he didn't have the slightest thought of giving up. His body shook, and his four limbs abruptly stomped on the ground. The four auspicious clouds under his feet suddenly produced a huge force, and his body instantly rushed out of the strange cloud. After rushing out of the cloud, without the terrifying bombardment of the various divine fires and thunder, his body healed at an extremely fast speed. In almost a breath's time, he had completely recovered. Woo-woo-woo-woo. The cloud did not let Luo Fan go. After Luo Fan left the cloud continued to fiercely pounce on Luo Fan. Luo Fan knew that the energy in the cloud was terrifying, and he understood that it was not something that he could withstand at this time. Naturally, he did not intend to be swallowed by the cloud. He lifted his foot and turned into a gray light, dodging the cloud's attack. Although the cloud was fast, it did not give up on chasing Luo Fan, but its flexibility seemed to be a big problem. Luo Fan only easily turned and then dodged the cloud. He arrived above the cloud. After easily dodging the cloud, Luo Fan almost couldn't believe that he had actually dodged the cloud so easily. He turned his body again, arrived in front of the cloud, and after teasing the cloud for a bit, he used his flexible body to turn around and easily escaped. The cloud let out a strange cry and closely followed behind Luo Fan. No matter how Luo Fan teased it, it did not give up. The two of them, one fleeing and one chasing, wandered in this extremely vast and empty space. After a long time, Luo Fan finally realized that the cloud was actually some kind of simple life form. In other words, every cloud within his line of sight was actually a life form with some sort of simple instinct. Unbelievable! This was the only thought in Luo Fan's mind at the moment. With his eyesight, he could clearly see that the cloud was completely composed of various kinds of astral winds, thunder, and fire. However, it was precisely this simple composition of various kinds of energy that had developed a kind of instinctive consciousness. This could not just be described as unbelievable. After testing it out, he teased the cloud to approach a larger, more condensed cloud. In the blink of an eye, the cloud seemed to be unable to put up any resistance and was swallowed by the larger, more condensed cloud. With a thought, Luo Fan teased the cloud that had swallowed the cloud to approach another, more condensed and larger cloud. The previous situation happened again, and the cloud was unable to put up any resistance and was swallowed by the larger cloud. After trying out a few times and discovering that it worked every time, Luo Fan completely relaxed. His body shuttled back and forth in the space. Occasionally, he would lift his foot or open his mouth to spit, and the clouds would scatter, turning into astral winds, thunder, and fire, and then be swallowed by the other clouds. After trying out a few times, he chose a relatively smaller, less condensed cloud and entered it. This cloud was condensed from more than 10 kinds of astral winds and more than 30 kinds of flames. Its power was considered average among the clouds he had seen. It was suitable for him to temper his body. As expected, after entering it, the speed at which the astral winds and flames destroyed his body was basically the same as the speed at which he recovered. The effect of tempering his body was also the best. Just like that, after more than half a year, the cloud was no longer of any use to him, and his body no longer suffered any harm within it. With a leap, he left the cloud. Then, he opened his mouth and spat out. The cloud let out a howl of agony and was instantly blasted into countless pieces. The pieces scattered into astral winds and divine flames, which were devoured by the other clouds in the surroundings. Chapter 9. Time was the least valuable in the great desolate world. In the blink of an eye, another 100 years had passed. At this moment, in the second layer of the atmospheric wind, lightning, and fire layer, an azure cloud that was 500 kilometers in circumference suddenly shook violently. The shaking came from the center of the cloud. In the blink of an eye, it had affected the most remote location of the entire cloud. The speed of the vibration was so fast that it made the entire cloud seem especially illusory. At the same time, the air around the cloud produced buzzing sounds due to the violent vibrations. The strange howling sounds that occasionally came from the cloud reached their limit at this moment and contained an indescribable mournfulness. The shaking and strange howls lasted for around a minute. After a minute, the entire cloud that was 500 kilometers in circumference, condensed to the point it was completely solid, suddenly dispersed with a bang. It turned into countless strong winds, lightning, and fire, exploding in all directions, creating ripples that could be seen with the naked eye. It was unknown whether it was space or air, but in the blink of an eye, it dispersed to a radius of 5,000 kilometers. It was unable to condense again and gradually dissipated. In this violent eruption, a 9-meter-long, 6-meter-tall Pai Xiao, with a dragon's head, a horse's body, and unicorn's feet, was covered in grayish-white fur and a pair of bright eyes. It constantly emitted a frightening aura from all over its body. It stood majestically in the middle of the incomparably violent wind, lightning, and fire. No matter how terrifying the impact was, when it touched its body, it was like a cool breeze and did not cause the slightest bit of damage. After 100 years of hard work, I've actually only doubled my strength. It's really too slow. At this moment, Luo Fan seemed to think that it was easy for him to say this while standing. During the past 100 years, he had almost visited every single place within a radius of 100,000 miles. From the smallest to the largest, he had visited every single cloud-shaped living being within this area, which was formed from wind, lightning, and fire. He had been constantly strengthening his body with the terrifying destructive power released by these clouds, which only had simple instincts when they were invaded by Ji-Hao's enemies. In the second layer of the atmospheric wind, lightning, and fire layer, the smaller the cloud, the weaker the pressure inside it. The strength of his body was limited. Only by going from small to large could his body gradually improve, and thus achieve the effect of refining his body. In this short period of 100 years, he had visited at least 7,000 to 8,000 clouds that had simple instincts. Every time he passed by a cloud, his body would improve a little, allowing him to endure even larger clouds to refine his body. The larger the cloud, the more obvious the effect on the body's refinement. Until today, his body had already more than doubled of what it was 100 years ago. Until now, his body had more than doubled of what it was 100 years ago. This kind of improvement could absolutely be regarded as shocking. It must be known that the strength of Luo Fan's body had already reached an inconceivable level before entering the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer. Even steel that had been tempered 100 times couldn't compare to the strength of his body at that time. However, even though his body's improvement was so obvious, the mysterious energy in his body, which he hoped to improve even more, did not have the slightest improvement. However, although his body's improvement was so obvious, the mysterious energy in his body, which he hoped to improve even more, did not have the slightest improvement. How it was before, how it was now. This made him understand that what he urgently needed now was not to refine his body, but to find the opportunity to make a breakthrough. In other words, to find the peak of Buzhou Mountain as soon as possible. Then, by observing Buzhou Mountain and comprehending the aura emitted by Buzhou Mountain, he would find the opportunity to make a breakthrough. Suddenly, an indescribable feeling appeared in Luo Fan's heart. This breakthrough is very important, very important. As long as I make a breakthrough, I can change my fate. Under this feeling, Luo Fan's eyes were a little dazed as he muttered, "Huh, what did I say just now?" Luo Fan's eyes became clear, and he looked around in bewilderment. Could this be the legendary heart's blood breakthrough? Naturally, he could not see anything abnormal, and his heart became even more bewildered. However, no matter how bewildered he was, his determination to find the peak of Buzhou Mountain as soon as possible and comprehend the opportunity to make a breakthrough became even more resolute. After making up his mind, he did not have any thoughts of continuing to refine his body here. He operated the mysterious energy in his body to protect his body, and with a stride, his body rose a few miles into the air. Without hesitation, he rushed into the barrier above the second layer of the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer, which was 2,000 miles deep in the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer. Looking up from below, this barrier was so blue that it was almost black. With his eyesight, he could not see through this gap at all. The peak of Buzhou Mountain was obviously not in the second layer of the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer. Therefore, he could not see the peak of Buzhou Mountain while his body was in the second layer. Originally, he thought that it would be the same after he crossed the second layer, and that he would definitely have to cross a few more layers before he could see the peak of Buzhou Mountain. But unexpectedly, when he crossed the barrier above the second layer, he didn't see anything else. The first thing that entered his eyes was a towering mountain that towered into the sky tens of millions of miles away. It was a huge mountain that towered into the dark sky above. At the same time, the vast, and unyielding aura that originally filled the world suddenly increased by 100 times. In the blink of an eye, his entire mind entered a mysterious and indescribable state. That's right, he had only broken through the second layer, but he could already see the peak of Buzhou Mountain. Under his feet was an incomparably vast surface. The deep blue surface was like an ocean. Thousands of miles in front of him, Buzhou Mountain rose up from the ocean, holding up the dark sky that was filled with countless stars and twinkling stars. The peak of Buzhou Mountain was not cone-shaped like an ordinary mountain. Instead, it was a very strange, flat shape with a slightly slanted surface. The entire sky seemed to be pressing down on Buzhou Mountain in some mysterious and unimaginable way. Anyone who stood there would feel as if the entire sky was pressing down on them, shocking their minds. The moment Luo Fan saw Buzhou Mountain, his entire mind was completely immersed in that indescribable realm. His eyes stared closely at the peak of Buzhou Mountain. In his mind, all the shapes, information, and aura of Buzhou Mountain that he had seen in the past rapidly entangled and combined. His body was gradually assimilated by the vast and unyielding aura that was 100 times stronger than the one below, and he began to gradually release that distinct vast and unyielding aura. Only 2 to 3 breaths had passed since he entered this place until his body released that vast and unyielding aura. Within these 2 to 3 breaths, several tens of dark purple, dark red, or dark cyan clouds, with the largest being 100 meters wide and the smallest being less than a meter in circumference, had already pounced on him, cackling in a strange manner. These were impressively all sorts of astral winds, lightning, and fire fused together in a special way, and possessed even more complicated instincts than the clouds down below. Looking at the aura emitted by those clouds, any one of them, even the smallest one with a circumference of 1 meter, was more powerful than the largest cloud in the second layer that was separated by a thin line. If several tens of clouds were to pounce on him, no matter how strong Luo Fan's body was, he would definitely not be able to withstand it. He would most likely die in the blink of an eye. As the several tens of cackling clouds were about to devour Luo Fan, a vast and unyielding aura burst out from Luo Fan's body. Under this vast and unyielding aura, the several tens of clouds suddenly paused, as if they were frozen in place, stopping just a line away from Luo Fan. Chapter 10. At this moment, the several dozens of clouds, which possessed simple instincts, drifted around like headless flies. Even when they occasionally brushed past Luo Fan's body, it was as if Luo Fan was just a shadow. They did not attack Luo Fan at all. It was as if the aura emanating from Luo Fan made them unable to sense Luo Fan. At this moment, Luo Fan did not pay any attention to the changes in his surroundings. At this very moment, his entire mind, and will were filled with all the information, aura, and details related to Buzhou Mountain. Everything he had observed over the past several tens of thousands of years about Buzhou Mountain, including bits and pieces and partial details, began to emerge in his mind, entangling with each other and reorganizing. His eyes were reflecting the top of Buzhou Mountain, which was thousands of miles away from him. The shape of Buzhou Mountain's top was completely different from the shape of Buzhou Mountain below. The change was so sudden that it was a great shock to Luo Fan, who had been used to the bottomless Buzhou Mountain for several tens of thousands of years. It was enough to make him sink into the state of comprehension he had when he saw Buzhou Mountain for the first time. Countless information kept emerging and reorganizing in his mind. Gradually, all the information, aura, and details he had received over the past several tens of thousands of years merged into one, forming a complete Buzhou Mountain that rose from the ground and reached up to the sky. The image of Buzhou Mountain in his mind was complete from the bottom to the top, from the foot of the mountain to the top of the sky. The bottom of Buzhou Mountain was extremely broad, with a diameter of several tens of thousands of miles. As it rose higher, the size of the mountain gradually shrunk until it reached a height of 100,000 miles above the ground, which was filled with countless stars before it reached its peak. The image of Bujo Mountain rotated slowly in Luo Fan's mind, becoming more complete and more detailed. The image was getting closer and closer to the real Bujo Mountain. This was the first time Luo Fan had seen a complete image of Bujo Mountain from the bottom to the top. It was also the first time he realized that just a shape could be so mysterious. It was only then that he understood that a seemingly ordinary mountain shape could contain so much mysterious information. The boundless and unyielding aura that only belonged to Bujo Mountain gradually spread out from the image of Bujo Mountain in his mind, gradually seeping into his whole body, mixing with the boundless and unyielding aura that had been emitting from his body before. In an instant, the aura of boundless and unyielding aura that had been emitting from his body had increased by 10 times. As the aura increased, the white clouds around him, which seemed to be confused and searching for Luo Fan, seemed to have encountered something extremely frightening. In the blink of an eye, they ran far away, leaving an area with a radius of over 1,000 miles around Luo Fan. Indomitable spirit, Bujo Mountain, Panga's backbone. Never yield, never give up. I will break the sky. I will fall and the earth will sink. These comprehensions about Bujo Mountain burst out from the depths of Luo Fan's mind, bit by bit. As time went by, more and more information was comprehended, and the speed at which it burst out was also getting faster and faster. In the end, it was like a flood that had broken through a dam, crazily gushing out. In the blink of an eye, like a balloon being blown, it filled Luo Fan's head to the point where it seemed like it was about to explode. As time went by, the boundless and unyielding aura that emanated from his body and the aura that emanated from Bujo Mountain continued to merge. After an unknown period of time, the aura that emanated from his body and the aura that emanated from Bujo Mountain completely merged into one. At the moment when the two auras completely merged, the information bursting out from Luo Fan's mind reached its limit. The feeling that his head was about to explode also reached its limit. Suddenly, countless thunderbolts connected with each other in his mind, as if Pangu had split the sky and earth apart in his mind. Then, an endless amount of lightning filled his entire mind. Everything in the outside world, everything in his body, everything in Bujo Mountain, everything that had burst out from the depths of his mind, disappeared completely at this moment. What he saw, what his ears heard, and what his thoughts were all filled with endless lightning. It was lightning that seemed to cut through the chaos, split heaven and earth, and divide yin and yang. At the same time, the spirit in his mind also underwent a tremendous change. The spirit, which had originally looked like his body, suddenly exploded, turning into a mass of gray, chaotic clouds that filled the entire spherical void with a diameter of 490 miles in his mud-pill palace. While the entire void was filled to the brim, it even caused the spherical void with a diameter of 490 miles to be unable to contain it, and it continued to expand outwards. Then, as if under the effect of some mysterious mechanism, an incomparably mysterious change occurred. The chaotic cloud that was formed from the explosion of the spirit began to slowly circulate according to an incomparably mysterious path. As this mysterious and unfathomable circulation continued, the chaotic cloud that was formed from the entire spirit instantly turned into hundreds of millions of extremely condensed silk threads. These silk threads were not intertwined with each other, but intertwined with each other in an incomparably mysterious way. Following the incomparably mysterious path, the silk threads continued to circulate and change forms. Plucking, 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 profound sounds that could shake one's soul and heaven and earth were constantly emitted from Luo Fan's mud-pill palace in the process of the hundreds of millions of threads circulating, shaking the surroundings, and even causing the void of untainted land to tremble slightly. It was as if an extremely powerful being was being nurtured in his Niwen palace. Along with this mysterious voice, the millions and millions of threads began to slowly shrink towards the spherical area with a diameter of 490 miles. Yang contracted, During the contraction process, the path of each thread is du. The contractions of each thread were completely different from the other threads, but the contractions of each thread were marvelous and full of mystery. Watching it made one feel relaxed and happy, as if they had comprehended something. Right at this moment, when the myriad of threads formed from souls were ceaselessly shrinking and condensing together, as if they were nurturing something, an indescribable aura suddenly appeared in the heavens and the earth. This aura was the first aura that had appeared in the primordial world since it had been created for hundreds of thousands of years. It was an aura that had never appeared before in the primordial world. This aura was extremely strange. It was faintly discernible, erratic, and formless. No one knew where it came from, and no one understood how it appeared. All of a sudden, it appeared. Suddenly, it wrapped around Luo Fan. The vast and unyielding aura emanating from Buzhou Mountain seemed to be completely non-existent to this aura. At the moment when this aura wrapped around his body, endless light, shadows, and sounds appeared in Luo Fan's mind. He seemed to be in an incomparably wonderful fairyland, with clouds and mist curling around, immortals flying, and clouds and cranes corresponding to each other. In the blink of an eye, he seemed to be in a land of tenderness. The goddess of lust twisted her incomparably seductive dance and walked towards him. Her fragrance wafted through the air, and she was as warm as jade. In the blink of an eye, he seemed to be in a magnificent hall, and countless people bowed down and shouted, "Long live." In the blink of an eye, he seemed to be full of children and grandchildren, and they were all filial and virtuous. All of these lights, shadows, and sounds vividly displayed all of Luo Fan's conjectures, fantasies, and delusions that had once appeared in his mind. Moreover, they were all immersed in the scene, incomparably real. At this moment, around Luo Fan, the extremely stable space of the primordial world suddenly distorted slightly. After the distortion, a thick black fog appeared out of thin air and instantly enveloped Luo Fan's body. Countless voices chanting, cursing, roaring, howling, praising, and acting coquettishly surged out from the black fog. Chapter 11. Previously, Luo Fan's mind was blank, so his thinking ability was naturally affected. These lights, shadows, and voices that appeared in his mind were very strange. Normally, he would naturally be able to easily discover that there were some obstructions, but at this moment, his thoughts were stagnant, and he couldn't distinguish what was real and what was fake. His entire mind was naturally and completely immersed in the various scenes created by the countless lights, shadows, and voices. Suddenly, he seemed to be cultivating the Tao, becoming a saint, moving mountains and draining seas, mastering the moon, the universe with a single thought, eternal life, and the moon. Suddenly, he seemed to have arrived in a land of gentleness, where hundreds and thousands of the most beautiful and alluring women in his mind were faintly discernible surrounding him. In an instant, he felt warm and fragrant, and he felt like he was being chilled. Suddenly, he seemed to have transformed into the embodiment of controlling the universe. With a single thought from tens of thousands of people, an emperor who would stain the heavens and earth with blood, enjoying the cheers of the people, and enjoying the supreme power in the blink of an eye. All of these made him feel like he had experienced thousands of lives, enjoying all the pleasures that could be enjoyed in the world, and obtaining all the achievements that could be obtained in the world. As long as one was immersed in these various scenes, even if one's mind was clear and rational, Luo Fan might not be able to maintain his sense of self and break away from these scenes. At this moment, his thoughts were stagnant, and he couldn't break away from this state of immersion. Every time he experienced a reincarnation, his mind would become a little sluggish. Every time he experienced a life of pleasure, the threads in his Niwen palace that were revolving and contracting according to the mysterious trajectory would slow down a little. Ha ha, ah, woo 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 woo. The sound in the black fog that enveloped Luo Fan's body became clearer and louder. The void around his body became more distorted, and the black fog continued to spread out at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it had already covered a radius of 1,000 miles. At the same time, the figures of countless strange creatures condensed and took shape in the black fog. These strange existences had all sorts of strange appearances. Some were incomparably ugly, some were incomparably beautiful, some were extremely shocking, some were incomparably enchanting, some were so strong that they could tear the world apart, some were so weak that they could not even withstand a light breeze. The expressions of these strange figures were incomparably rich. Joy, anger, sorrow, joy, love, hate, laughter, howling, acting coquettishly, seduction, obedience, disgust, and so on and so forth. Anything that could be found in the world could be found here. These were not illusions. It was not an existence of nothingness. At this moment, if one were to look through the black fog, one would be able to see that the black fog had enveloped the entire city. Yang Luo Fan's entire body was bitten by the countless mouths of these strange creatures. Luo Fan's body was terrifyingly strong. One after another, the strange creatures were crushed by the recoil in the process of gnawing on him. But at the same time, more strange creatures pounced on him and gnawed on him. The numbers were boundless, advancing wave after wave, pushing and pushing him aside as they crazily attacked and gnawed at him. Although the strength of Luo Fan's body had already reached a level that surpassed that of a diamond, under the endless accumulation of these strange creatures, under the wave after wave of gnawing, he still could not bear it. After shattering the gnawing of thousands of strange creatures, for the first time, a monster with a human face and a gentle smile on its face, with the body of Python, bit through his body for the first time and tore out a small piece of flesh. As the first wound appeared, that seemingly indestructible defense collapsed in an instant. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of strange creatures had bitten through his body. In the blink of an eye, Luo Fan had lost 1% of his flesh. Luo Fan's entire mind was immersed in pleasure again and again. His entire mind seemed to be incomparably satisfied and happy. Apart from pleasure, there was nothing else in his mind. Apart from pleasure, he did not want to think of anything else. His willpower gradually sank into the abyss of pleasure. As his willpower sank, finally, at a certain moment, the threads formed by the chaotic clouds in his mud-pill palace finally stopped moving. It was as if time had stopped when it had shrunk to half the size of the spherical void with a diameter of 490 miles. At that time, it was also when the first monster gnawed through his body. It was also when his body was being devoured at an incomparably fast speed. Hiss, 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 hiss. Suddenly, from within the black fog, a strange sound that was completely different from all the other strange noises rang out. At first glance, one could tell that this sound was different from all the other sounds. In the midst of all the other noises, anyone, no matter how weak their hearing was, would definitely be able to distinguish this sound at first glance. However, if one listened carefully and tried to distinguish the difference between this sound and all the other sounds, one would find that this sound was actually not much different from all the other sounds. If this sound was taken out and compared with any other sound, one would find that there was actually not much difference between the two sounds. This kind of contradiction was extremely strange. Hiss, 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 hiss. That sound kept ringing out continuously without stopping. As time passed, the feeling that it was completely different from all the other sounds became more and more obvious. After a few breaths, it had already suppressed all the other sounds. And at this time, the difference between this sound and all the other sounds was also exposed without any concealment. This was the sound of a living creature. The other sounds in the black fog seemed to have all kinds of emotions, as if there were countless living monsters crying out. However, deep in the sound, there was a kind of numbness, a kind of mechanical feeling, as if it was operating according to some kind of program. If one's perception was sharp, one would definitely be able to tell that this was not the sound of a living creature. This feeling was very weak, and if there was no comparison, naturally very few people would be able to discover it. However, with the comparison, with the sound of a living creature, even if the feeling of that living creature was very weak, it was enough to make that living creature stand out. It was also because of this reason that the strange hiss of hiss could be immediately identified. This change continued. As time passed, the sound became more and more obvious, stronger and stronger, while the other noises became less and less, and became softer and softer. After an unknown period of time, the originally incomparably dense black fog that occupied an area of 1,000 miles suddenly formed a vortex, and all the black fog began to rapidly shrink towards the center. Yang shrank. In just a breath's time, above Luo Fan's body that had almost become a skeleton, it condensed into a 9 meters long, 6 meters tall figure. This figure had a dragon head, a horse body, unicorn feet, and was completely black. Impressively, it was the figure of Luo Fan's Pai Xiao. Primitive world. Pangu. Pangu. Primitive world. Under that kind of changing expression, the black Pai Xiao constantly muttered to itself, vaguely repeating the two words primitive world and Pangu hiss. Occasionally, it would make a few strange, meaningless hiss sounds. As time went by, the frequency of those meaningless strange sounds became less and less, and the two words primitive world and Pangu became more and more clear and more fluent. Suddenly, 2 9-colored rays of light flashed, and the black Pai Xiao's eyes turned from the original jet black to the color of colored glass, shining with 9-colored rays of light. There is a sky outside the realm, and he is embodiment transformation. I'm a great freedom sky devil. As its eyes turned into the color of colored glass, the black Pai Xiao spat out such an incomparably majestic sentence. Chapter 12. As soon as he finished speaking, the great unrestrained heavenly demon's body shuddered violently before exploding into a cloud of extremely dense black mist again. However, different from the first black mist, this time there were 2 beams of 9-colored light in the black mist. Yang constantly expanded and contracted, faintly discernible in the black fog. Then, within a breath, the black mist shrank rapidly and turned into a 2-meter-tall figure. Yes, it was a human figure. Except for the 9-colored eyes, it looked exactly the same as the human of the future. The figure gradually became clearer. The black mist faded, and the colorful light became richer. It was a human body that looked like a man, but not a woman. Such an image should be very awkward and disgusting. But when it appeared on the body of this human, it didn't look awkward at all, and it didn't look ugly at all. Instead, it had an incomparably mysterious and charming charm. At first glance, people would be involuntarily immersed in it, and their minds would be involuntarily attracted by it. Is this the Pangu world, the prehistorical world? It's indeed magical. A leisurely sigh came from the mouth of the figure with the 9-colored eyes. Although he could tell that this voice was the same as the one who had spoken those authoritative words, the tone and tone of this voice were completely different from before. It sounded like a man, but not a man, like a woman, but not a woman. It was erratic and constantly changing. This human was the master of the great freedom sky devil, who was outside the prehistorical world. In the past, when Pangu created the world, his power stirred up the chaos, and there were countless worlds born along with the prehistorical world. They naturally evolved and formed countless worlds, and countless creatures were born in them. His great freedom sky devil was one of these countless worlds. The great freedom sky devil was the master of the great freedom sky. These worlds were formed by the aftershocks of Pangu's power. Their structure was extremely unstable, and their sizes were naturally far smaller than the prehistorical world. However, because they and the prehistorical world were all created by Pangu, although one was intentional, the others were unintentional. They were inextricably linked to the prehistorical world. Therefore, under certain special circumstances, powerful living beings of other worlds could descend into the primordial world through extremely special methods. This vast freedom heavenly devil had borrowed the mystical changes that occurred during Luo Fan's breakthrough, and had relied on Luo Fan's power to descend. The Mahasvara heavenly demon had a faint smile on his face. His expression kept changing, and a terrifying aura emanated from his body. With those words, the world within a 500-kilometer radius of the Mahesvara heavenly devil instantly changed. The originally empty space turned into a small world where clouds and mist curled up and heavenly flowers fell from the sky. The enchanting fragrance refreshed the heart and refreshed the mind. In this small world, there were innumerable extremely handsome men, innumerable exceedingly beautiful women, innumerable treasures that shook one's heart, and innumerable voices that bewitched one's five senses. They were constantly changing and breathtaking. Then, behind great freedom heavenly demon, a 5-meter-tall throne appeared. It was majestic and dignified, and there were countless beautiful scenes of the world engraved on it. The Mahesvara heavenly demon slowly sat on the throne. An incomparably dignified aura that seemed to control everything immediately emanated, filling every corner of the small world within a 500-kilometer radius. As a result, the small world within a 500-kilometer radius seemed to be held in the hands of an existence at this moment. Everything was under the control of that existence. At this moment, Luo Fan's body was like a skeleton. Because the Mahesvara heavenly demon had chosen its position, it happened to be right in front of the throne. His appearance was disheveled, but he looked like he was worshipping the Mahesvara heavenly demon on the throne. This spirit is very weak, but he paved the way for me to descend. Fine, I'll help him become the Mahesvara heavenly demon general. The Mahesvara heavenly demon's eyes flashed with 9-colored light as it looked down at the skeleton-like Luo Fan. It spoke in a voice that was neither male nor female. Then it raised its slender, soft, and jade-like palm and covered Luo Fan's body. As it covered Luo Fan, a 9-colored light appeared out of thin air around Luo Fan and kept seeping into his body. In the blink of an eye, the surface of his body was dyed with 9-colored light. Everything is fake. So, everything is fake. Pangu split the heavens. I am the backbone. I am the indomitable spirit. I am Bujo. As the 9-colored light filled Luo Fan's entire skeleton and was about to seep into his bone marrow and dye every inch of his body with 9-colored light, a leisurely voice seemed to come from all over the void. It was grand and majestic, like the rumbling of thunder, but it sounded gentle and peaceful, like a gentle breeze and a fine drizzle, seeping into one's soul. Why struggle thou? Why resist? All living creatures in the world have their own desires, such as longevity, power, pleasure, wealth. All kinds of desires are endless. How can they be satisfied if they don't come to the Mahesvara heavenly realm? The Mahesvara heavenly demon sighed. I only seek to be true. I only seek to be unfettered. I only seek to see the complete evolution of the primordial world. I only seek to see the end of the world. I only seek to use my own strength to hold up the heavens and the earth. I only seek to use my own heart to dispel all devils. The voice that appeared out of thin air grew louder with every single word it spoke, and every single word it spoke was dignified. In the end, when it spoke of dispelling all devils, it was like thunder from the 9 heavens, and it shook the heavens and the earth in an area of 5,000 kilometers and resounded through the clouds. As the voice continued, the small world created by the Mahesvara heavenly demon began to shake violently, like a picture being shaken violently. Along with the shaking, a stream of chaotic, mysterious energy gradually surged out of Luo Fan's skeleton-like body. Along with the vibration, Luo Fan's skeleton-like body began to fill up at a visible rate, like a hot spring being poured into an empty well. Within a breath's time, the flesh and blood that were eaten by the monsters in the dark mist were all replenished. At this moment, the small world created by the Mahesvara heavenly demon was shaking to an extreme degree. Countless three-dimensional spiderweb-like cracks covered the area within 1,000 miles in radius. Hold up the sky and earth, dispel all the evil obstacles. The great freedom sky demon didn't care about the change of the small world he had created. He just sighed. His voice was very distant, like a lover talking to his ear or an enemy cursing in front of his eyes. The spirit of Pangu is indeed extraordinary. It seems that this isn't the right time for me to descend. Never mind. Now is not the right time for me to descend. The Mahasvara heavenly demon's voice didn't sound much different from before. By the time it finished speaking, the cracks in the small world had already covered every inch of the small world within 1,000 kilometers. The size of the cracks had also expanded to the point that the scenery outside could be seen through the cracks. Crack, crack, crack. Following a series of strange noise, the small world created by the Mahasvara heavenly demon shattered into countless pieces, then dissipated in the air. As the small world disappeared, the space around the Mahasvara heavenly demon and his throne twisted intensely. After the twisting, the Mahasvara heavenly demon and his throne disappeared, as if they were never here. Chapter 13. This change happened as fast as a spark. In the blink of an eye, the entire situation had undergone a tremendous change. After the great freedom heavenly demon throne disappeared, the atmosphere 2,000 miles deep in the gangwind, thunder, and fire layer became peaceful again. The vast and unyielding aura emanating from Buzhou Mountain was still strong, filling the world as if nothing had happened before. After Luo Fan's flesh and blood were restored, the mysterious energy suddenly shrank back into Luo Fan's body. As the energy shrank back, the surface of Luo Fan's body stopped changing, and the gangwind, thunder, and fire layer also stopped changing. After an unknown period of time, it might have been a moment, or it might have been several years, Luo Fan's mind was in a trance, as if he had never been so clear-headed as to see all the mysteries of the world. He also seemed to be in a daze, unconscious, and not even sure of his own existence. In his eyes, there seemed to be enlightenment, but also confusion. Before, the endless wonderful things that he had seen and felt in his mind were all aimed at the weaknesses in his heart, at the things that he longed for the most, and at the delusions that had once appeared in the depths of his heart. This kind of targeting made his mind gradually sink into it, and he became more and more unable to extricate himself. When the threads condensed from the chaotic clouds in his mud-pill palace stopped moving and shrank to half the volume of the void opened up by his mud-pill palace, his mind had already sunk to the bottom. With just a little more effort, his mind might be swallowed by the endless desire in the blink of an eye. If that happened, his mind would dissipate, and his body would be swallowed by the heavenly demon, and then both his body and soul would be destroyed. At that moment of life and death, as if his life instinct had broken out, an inexplicable understanding appeared in his mind. Is this what I'm pursuing? Don't tell me that my existence is to pursue this endless pleasure. This doubtful thought lingered in his mind. With the appearance of this doubt, the blissful feeling that he had been indulging in gradually became somewhat illusory. The willpower that had been constantly sinking and was about to dissipate stopped sinking and dissipating. Does such happiness really exist in this world? Is this really happiness? No pain, everything comes true. Does such a life really exist? Really? Fake? As he voiced his doubts, the world formed by all the beautiful lights and sounds that seemed to exist in his mind was gradually filled with countless cracks. I remember now. I'm in the untainted world, using Buzhou Mountain to look for an opportunity to break through. This is a tribulation. With this realization, the seemingly real Elysium collapsed in an instant. His mind and his consciousness instantly left the pure land of ultimate bliss. It broke away from the scene that he had weaved in his heart, the scene that he yearned for the most. The entire process was done without the slightest bit of hesitation. I am no longer the Luo Fan of the past. The Elysium of the past is no longer what I'm pursuing. I'm pursuing the Tao. Luo Fan shouted in his mind. As he shouted, his consciousness returned to his body. With the return of his consciousness, the countless threads that had been condensed from the chaotic clouds in his mud-pill palace began to shrink at a faster speed than before. At the same time, he also sensed a strange feeling coming from all parts of his body. It was a strange feeling as if all the flesh and blood in his body had been completely separated from him, and only his bones were left. At the same time, there was a feeling that a strange energy was constantly invading and assimilating his body. Limp and numb, like a floating immortal, along with this feeling came the leisurely sigh of the great freedom heavenly devil. As this sentence entered his mind, endless information emerged from the depths of his mind, instantly drowning his mind and consciousness. The information instantly made him understand the reason for the sigh, and he instantly understood everything that had happened just now. It turns out that it's the extraterrestrial heavenly devil from outside the untainted land. It turns out that everything I've seen and heard before is the devil barrier in the depths of my heart, the obstacle in my pursuit of the Tao. It turns out that an inexplicable understanding appeared in his mind. As this understanding appeared, the nameless cultivation method that he had comprehended on Buzhou Mountain tens of thousands of years ago began to operate rapidly in the depths of his mind. At that moment, the originally difficult words unfolded in front of him like an extremely simple and clear picture scroll. The breakthrough opportunity that he had been unable to find and the direction that he had been unable to understand became so clear and straightforward at this moment. When Pangu created the world, I was the backbone. I stood tall and upright, and I was Buzhou. These words suddenly surged in his mind, causing him to involuntarily open his mouth and utter them in a very profound tone. Only these words were uttered in a profound tone, while the previous words were uttered in an ordinary tone. These words seemed to possess some kind of mysterious power, or perhaps this profound tone had some kind of mysterious effect. As these words were uttered, the chaotic threads that had shrunk into a bright spot in his mind suddenly exploded into a chaotic cloud, filling the void of his mud-pill palace with a diameter of 490 miles. Then, these chaotic clouds condensed into even finer and tougher chaotic threads, which shrunk and shrunk back into the state of a tiny chaotic bright spot. A moment later, they exploded and shrunk again. This cycle lasted for a total of 81 times. Every time they exploded and shrunk, the chaotic threads would become a little thinner and tougher. After 81 cycles, the threads had become as thin as a spider's web and as tough as a diamond. In the spherical void of 490 miles in diameter, one could easily overlook them if they were not careful. These extremely fine and tough chaotic threads did not shrink into tiny chaotic specks like the previous 80 times when they shrunk for the last time. Instead, it was like a cocoon woven from silk in the spherical void of a Naiwan palace that was 490 kilometers in diameter. They formed a tiny, thumb-sized Buzhou mountain. As the tiny Buzhou mountain took shape, the vast and unyielding aura emanating from his body instantly soared by 10 times. It even surpassed the aura emitted by Mount Buzhou that enveloped the surroundings. During this period of time, the mysterious energy in his body had automatically driven away all the nine-colored energy, and the mysterious, super-strong healing ability had replenished his flesh and blood. After the tiny Buzhou mountain took shape, a wave of enlightenment appeared in Luo Fan's mind, and he could not help but express it in a profound tone. I only seek truth. I only seek freedom. I only seek to see the evolution of the primitive land. I only seek to see the end of the world. I only seek to stand out from the world with my own strength. I only seek to destroy all evil obstacles with my own heart. As he spoke, the entire world created by great freedom, heavenly devil, suddenly collapsed. Because of this, great freedom, heavenly devil himself left the primitive land. Then, in the blink of an eye, the mysterious energy that had enveloped Luo Fan's body suddenly retracted. Following the route of the nameless divine art, it poured into his Naiwan palace in the blink of an eye and rushed straight into the void of the Naiwan palace. Inside Yang's Buzhou mountain, as the mysterious energy surged in, the entire tiny Buzhou mountain suddenly became extremely heavy. It fell straight to the bottom of the spherical void and then suddenly rose up. In the blink of an eye, it had expanded to the top of the spherical void. At this point, the change of Buzhou mountain did not stop. It continued to expand and push up with a bang. As if the world was being created, the gray barrier around it was pushed open, and the spherical void was pushed higher and higher. Chapter 14. Luo Fan's entire mind was in a magical state. Up, down, left, right, front, back, in every direction, everything in the spherical area with a radius of 10,000 miles was reflected in his mind, vivid and lifelike. The layer of gale, thunder, lightning, and fire was 90,000 miles above the ground. It was divided into 9 layers, one layer every 1,000 miles. In total, it was 9,000 miles thick. At this moment, Luo Fan was at the place where the gale, thunder, lightning, and fire layer had just left the second layer and entered the third layer. In other words, he was 2,000 miles deep in this layer. Standing in this position, Jihao's mind could reflect up, down, left, right, front, and back, covering the entire layer of gale, thunder, lightning, and fire layer vertically. The moment this magical state appeared, Luo Fan had a macroscopic understanding of the distribution of the gale, thunder, lightning, and fire layer. The first layer of the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer was between 90,000 miles to 90,000 miles from the ground. The entire layer was filled with all kinds of existences, which were filled with endless power, incomparably beautiful, and incomparably dangerous astral wind, thunder, and fire. These gale, thunders, and fire layers were originally as calm as water, but if anything from the outside world intruded into it, it would cause a chemical reaction, instantly turning violent and violent, generating an endless destructive power, crazily attacking these intruding things, and wouldn't stop until one of them was dead. Looking up from below, this layer of gale, thunder, lightning, and fire layer was separated from the sky by a blue sky. It was also the sky that one would see when looking up from the ground. In the second layer of gale, thunder, lightning, and fire layer, the entire layer was filled with countless cloud-shaped living beings that were condensed from all kinds of gale, thunders, and fire, and possessed simple instincts. These living beings had an extremely strong desire to expel others. As long as they sensed that something had intruded into this layer, they would attack the intruder wave after wave, disregarding everything else until they were destroyed or the intruder was destroyed. This kind of living being was far more powerful than the gale, thunders, and fire in the first layer. Looking up from below, the first layer was separated from this layer by a deep blue sky. The third layer of gale, thunder, lightning, and fire layer was filled with cloud-shaped living beings that were more condensed, smaller, and more complicated than the second layer. The characteristics of these life forms were similar to the life forms on the second level, just that they were smarter and knew how to give up. Looking up from below, the gap between the second floor and the first floor was pitch black. From a third layer of the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer to the ninth layer, there was no visible barrier. There was no visible separation between the various levels, but they were not mixed together. Instead, they were separated by some invisible force. From this level up, the astral wind, lightning, and fire in each level had already condensed into living beings according to various proportions. From the fourth layer onward, these life forms were no longer in the shape of clouds. Instead, according to their composition and energy composition, they could transform into all kinds of living forms, such as wolf head, tiger body, dog head, bird body, 7 arms and 8 legs, 9 heads and 10 tails, no eyes and no ears, and so on and so forth. They were strange and unpredictable. The higher the level, the more varied the form of these life forms, and the more complex and powerful their life instincts became. By the time they reached the 9th level, these life forms had already formed countless groups. They attacked and devoured each other. Their life instincts had already evolved into wisdom, even surpassing ordinary people. They could already comprehend cultivation techniques and seek the path of immortality. They were no longer filled with danger and desolation like the lower levels. Instead, they were strange and dazzling, marvelous and magnificent. It could be said that the changes of the living beings in the 9th layer of gale, thunder, lightning, and fire layer had already displayed the evolution of life in a direct way. Observing the structure of the 9th layer of gale, thunder, lightning, and fire layer, Luo Fan seemed to have understood something. At this time, the spherical void in his mud-pill palace, which was wrapped by a dusky substance, had completely changed its shape, turning into a dome. In other words, a hemispherical cover. The Buzhou Mountain, which was formed by the divine soul, was right in the middle of this dome. Like the roots of an old tree, it continued to spread towards the entire bottom of the dome, and the area of influence became wider and wider. At this time, it had occupied more than half of the bottom of the dome, causing the entire bottom to become undulating, bulging, and protruding, gradually forming the appearance of a complete land with various terrains. Above, the top of the Buzhou Mountain was supporting the highest point of the dome. As it grew bigger and bigger, the dusky substance that enveloped the dome, under the fierce support of the Buzhou Mountain, surged and shattered without the slightest ability to resist or resist. Endless whirlpools were produced at the edge of these substances, and voids were produced in the center of these whirlpools. Collapse. Then they merged into the dome below, constantly increasing the size of the dome. Just as Luo Fan seemed to have understood something, the shape of the Buzhou Mountain, which was formed by the divine soul, seemed to have undergone a slight change. This change was very subtle, so subtle that even Luo Fan himself could not find out what exactly had changed. The result of this change was that the entire Buzhou Mountain seemed to be clearer than before. This change was very strange. Without this change, Luo Fan would not even know that the Buzhou Mountain, which was formed by the divine soul, could still be clearer. At the same time, the expansion of the Buzhou Mountain also sped up a little. In the blink of an eye, the entire dome, which was the size of the sea of consciousness, had thickened to a height of 2,000 miles. Endless thunderclaps resounded in Luo Fan's mind, filling his thoughts. Along with all these came a feeling of extreme confidence and satisfaction. As the Buzhou Mountain grew, he could feel his divine soul constantly strengthening, his mind constantly being cleansed, and his willpower constantly becoming firmer. At the same time, the scene reflected in his mind became wider and wider, expanding from the original 10,000 miles. When the dome reached a height of 2,000 miles, the area reflected by his mind had already expanded to 20,000 miles. Up, down, left, right, front, and back, the spherical area with a radius of 20,000 miles had already enveloped the entire astral wind, thunder, and fire layer in a vertical direction. It had even extended to hundreds of layers of clouds below. However, the situation going up was beyond his expectations. The 9 layers of astral wind, thunder, and fire layer were 9,000 miles in total. Above them was a boundless sky. In other words, it was a boundless starry sky. This starry sky was not entirely made up of stars. Among the boundless stars, there were hundreds of pieces of land that seemed to be floating in the starry sky. They seemed extremely small, but were actually extremely vast. In other words, heaven and earth. These worlds were like primordial worlds, filled with all sorts of strange sceneries. Due to his limited perception, Luo Fan could not clearly see the scenes inside these worlds. He only knew that these worlds seemed to be revolving slowly around the Buzhou Mountain according to some very mysterious rules. The strange thing was that this starry sky seemed endless and incomparably vast, with no end in sight. However, Luo Fan's perception, which could only reflect the surrounding 20,000 kilometers in all directions, was able to project this incomparably vast starry sky vertically upwards in his mind. It was like looking at something far away with a pair of binoculars. Although he knew that the thing was very far away from him, although he knew that he should not be able to see it, with the help of the binoculars, the thing seemed to be right in front of him. This was what Luo Fan was experiencing at the moment. Chapter 15. The starry sky was endless, but all of it was reflected vertically in Luo Fan's mind, and he could perceive it in some mysterious way. However, that was all there was to it. After wrapping the entire starry sky in a vertical direction with his mysterious perception, no matter how his perception ability improved, the range of his perception did not increase at all. It just stagnated there. Even though the vertical thickness of the sea of consciousness in his mind had reached 3,000 miles, and the scene that could be reflected in his mind had also increased to more than 30,000 miles, the scene reflected in his mind had only reached the end of the starry sky. As for what was beyond that, whether it was still an endless starry sky, whether there was a world, or simply a void, or even an infinite world, he had no idea. This strange and mysterious situation contained endless mysteries, and if he could really figure it out, it would definitely make a great progress in his cultivation. But now was not the time. Don't forget, at this moment, an earth-shaking change was happening in Luo Fan's Mud Pill Palace. The Buzhou Mountain that was formed by the divine soul kept expanding and kept grinding away the surrounding gray matter, expanding the size of the sea of consciousness in the shape of a dome. Crack, 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 crack. The crisp sound was transmitted into his mind, and the scene that was getting bigger and bigger was blasted into countless pieces, making him unable to maintain that mysterious perception. His whole mind was gradually filled with all kinds of louder and more frequent sounds. His whole mind gradually became empty because of this. After an unknown period of time, the whole world seemed to be shaking violently. The endless emptiness in his mind gradually collapsed and shattered under this violent shock. After shattering that blankness, he felt that he had become an incomparably powerful existence. A vast and unyielding aura surged in the depths of his heart. It was as if he could shatter the heavens and the earth with just a lift of his hand or a kick of his foot. Feeling carefully, his heart was immediately filled with endless shock. So, this is the real effect of this nameless method. This was the only thought that surged in Luo Fan's mind like thunder, because at this moment he felt that he had transformed into Buzhou Mountain. It was not the northwest heavenly pillar Buzhou Mountain in the untainted world outside, but the Buzhou Mountain in the void of the sea of consciousness that his divine soul had transformed into. The Buzhou Mountain was like his body, standing in the middle of the void of the sea of consciousness. Young, unbeknownst to him, this spiritual sea had already become a world of its own, a world with a circumference of 49,000 li and a height of 49,000 li. In other words, it was a world shaped like a dome. In this world, his spirit incarnated into the shape of Buzhou Mountain, towering in the middle. Yang, the bottom of the mountain, stood firmly on the ground, firmly integrated with every inch of space on the ground. The peak of the mountain held up the sky of this world like a pillar that supported the entire world. Boundless pressure pressed down on him from both above and below. The pressure was so strong that it felt as if countless mountains were falling from the sky. It was unimaginably heavy, but these couldn't affect him at all. His mind was filled with a boundless and unyielding aura, a lofty sentiment of wanting to push him back even if the sky were to collapse. Under this vast and unyielding aura, under this lofty feeling of holding up against the heavens and earth, the terrifying pressure that assaulted him from above and below was just right. It didn't make him feel powerless, nor did it make him feel like he couldn't bear it. Pangu split the sky. I am the backbone, indomitable spirit, I am Buzhou. These 16 words. So this is what they mean. After the thought, just now, another thought appeared in his mind. Observing the entire world from the perspective of Buzhou Mountain, he could see everything in the world. The ground was uneven and undulating. It seemed messy, but it had a very mysterious pattern. Combined with the entire Buzhou Mountain, it was like a real land. The sky, on the other hand, was gray and overcast, as if it was right in front of his eyes, surging and shattering, as if endless layers of clouds had covered the entire sky. Such a sky, such a land, made the entire world seem extremely desolate. However, the development of the situation didn't give Luo Fan too much time to feel this desolate and strange world of the sea of consciousness. Suddenly, the Buzhou Mountain formed by his spirit shook violently. Endless virtual shadows burst out from the Buzhou Mountain like bullets from a submachine gun. After these virtual shadows left the Buzhou Mountain formed by his spirit, They instantly shrunk from the original indomitable spirit to the size of a grain of rice in the blink of an eye. The virtual shadows continued to spurt out for a long time. It didn't stop until the number of virtual shadows had exceeded hundreds of millions. These hundreds of millions of virtual shadows kept condensing and finally turned into a stream of gray and brown airflow that was like a mountain rock. In the world created by the sea of consciousness, it was like a tiny thread which seemed so insignificant. Talisman. Luo Fan was very surprised, but at the same time, he was very happy. This was because he felt that these virtual shadows of Buzhou Mountain were formed by three-dimensional talismans that were so complicated that ordinary people would collapse with just one look at them. The virtual shadow of Buzhou Mountain was just the shape of these talismans. And what formed these talismans was an incomparably mysterious energy. Its degree of purity and concentration was more than 100 times stronger than the mysterious energy in Luo Fan's body. This stream of airflow, formed by hundreds of millions of talismans, wandered in the sea of consciousness like a living creature, extremely agile and elegant. Moreover, it was completely under Luo Fan's control. The degree of control even went deep into every talisman. As his control over the airflow deepened, suddenly his mind moved, and another piece of information burst out from the depths of his mind. The words used were still the incomparably complicated words that recorded the nameless divine technique, but they contained endless information. Is this the so-called magic power? He instantly came to such a realization. With the appearance of this understanding, this magic power suddenly shook and flowed into an extremely mysterious location in the sea of consciousness, instantly disappearing from the sea of consciousness. Luo Fan was very clear about everything in the sea of consciousness, and instantly understood that the mysterious location was the connection point between the sea of consciousness and his body. With a rush of his thoughts, it also followed that mysterious location rushed out of the sea of consciousness and entered his body. The feeling of his entire body, the situation inside and outside of his body, instantly flowed into his thoughts. At this moment, that magic power had already flowed into his meridians that were the size of a bowl. Although this magic power was very small, not much bigger than a strand of hair, its power was extremely terrifying. After this magic power entered, this bowl-sized meridian was actually unable to withstand it and instantly collapsed into pieces. Then, an incomparably strong, attractive force was produced from his body, tearing all the surrounding energy and continuously sucking these energies into his body. At this moment, his position was the third level of the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer. With the appearance of such a terrifying, tearing force, the entire astral wind, thunder, and fire layer instantly reacted. One after another, cloud-like living creatures of various colors seemed to have found a target and madly rushed towards him. Chapter 16. The range of this terrifying, tearing force continued to expand. In the blink of an eye, it had already spread to a radius of 1,000 miles, and it still didn't stop. It was still spreading out at an unimaginably fast speed. It continued to expand. Luo Fan was now 2,000 miles deep into the gale, thunderfire layer. This terrifying, tearing force affected a radius of 1,000 miles, and instantly tore apart the barrier between the second and third layer of the gale, thunderfire layer, which was not far away from his body. The barrier between the two layers of the gale, thunderfire layer, and gale was a fragile balance formed after experiencing countless impacts and battles since the creation of this world tens of thousands of years ago. Although it was called a barrier, it wasn't a real existence. Instead, it was an invisible barrier formed between the layers of gale, thunderfire, and gale of different levels under the influence of the natural laws. At this time, this invisible barrier was torn to pieces by such a terrifying, tearing force. The fragile balance between the second and third layers of the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer was instantly broken. The astral wind, thunder, and fire within a radius of 10,000 miles around Luo Fan's body were completely rioted. The scope of the riot was 10 times that of the tearing force, and it affected a radius of 10,000 miles around Luo Fan's body. The gale, thunderfire, and gale in the second and third layer had all condensed into cloud-shaped living beings. At this time, with this riot, the cloud-shaped life forms that were originally pouncing towards Luo Fan's body instantly let out incomparably mournful screams. With a loud bang, they once again exploded into surging astral winds, thunder, and fire. An oblate ball-shaped whirlpool was formed around Luo Fan's body, crazily rushing towards him with a terrifying force. Along the way, the air exploded, creating a vacuum. Even the space couldn't withstand such a terrifying force, and seemed to be slightly distorted. The gale, thunderfire, and gale from the second and third layer were 100 times purer than the gale, thunderfire, and gale from the first layer. Their power was at least 1,000 times stronger than the gale, thunderfire, and gale from the first layer. They were shining with colorful lights, filling the space within a radius of 10,000 miles. With such a huge range of energy turbulence and such a terrifying explosion of power, not to mention that Luo Fan was currently unable to move. Even if he could move, he would definitely not be able to dodge it. In an instant, boundless astral winds, lightning, and fire blasted Luo Fan's body. All kinds of heavenly thunders, divine fires, and fierce winds of different attributes burst out, as if they were facing their mortal enemies and were exerting all of their powers on Luo Fan's body. At this time, the meridians in Luo Fan's body had already been shattered by that hair-sized magical power. His body could be said to be at its weakest moment. At this moment, the incomparably condensed and pure astral winds, lightning, and fire erupted with power that could even distort space. When they struck his body, the result could be imagined. In an instant, Luo Fan's body was completely destroyed. Bones, flesh, blood, meridians, everything was reduced to the tiniest speck of dust. At this time, the astral winds, lightning, and fire still did not relax. They continued to unleash their most terrifying attacks on Luo Fan's original position, exploding with their most powerful destructive power and bombarding him in a frenzy. Among them, the most dazzling and most obvious were the heavenly thunders of different attributes. Every type of heavenly thunders had a unique color. When they interweaved together, they appeared colorful and extremely gorgeous. These heavenly thunders were densely packed, like the spikes of a hedgehog, covering the area within a radius of 10,000 miles around Luo Fan's body. The dazzling colors and the terrifying changes could be seen and sensed even from hundreds of thousands of miles away. On the ground below Luo Fan, the towering mountain had already been turned into a flatland. Although the chaotic energy that originally stretched from the ground to the top of the mountain had been dispersed for so many years, it had not decreased by much. It was still constantly dispersing. The only difference was that the energy that originally came from the top of the mountain had now come from a hole in the ground. Looking up from the hole in the sky, one could see that the originally cloudless blue sky had undergone a great change. A bowl-sized vortex gradually appeared in the sky. This vortex exuded a colorful and gorgeous light. It was like a gem embedded in the blue sky. After this vortex appeared, it rapidly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it had already grown from the size of a bowl to covering the entire sky. This was the scene of the violent astral winds, lightning, and fire around Luo Fan's body. The violent astral winds, lightning, and fire affected an area of 10,000 miles. The ground was only 90,000 miles away from the astral winds, lightning, and fire. With such a large size and such a distance, it naturally seemed to cover the entire sky. As the five-colored vortex expanded to its limit, an invisible suction force suddenly appeared. The chaotic energy that had been flowing out of the underground cave seemed to have been torn apart by some kind of terrifying force and instantly transformed into a gray pillar that shot up into the sky, reaching 90,000 miles into the sky. Like a pillar that supported the heavens, it rushed into the center of the five-colored vortex. Yang! The chaotic energy emitted by this chaotic energy source could be chosen by the increasingly picky Luo fan. So the amount of chaotic energy it contained was absolutely astonishing. Although it had condensed into a pillar that supported the heavens and shot into the astral winds, lightning, and fire, it did not lose much of its quantity because of the distance. The amount of chaotic energy was still incomparably astonishing. It was incomparably condensed. It broke through the layers of astral winds, lightning, and fire, and directly entered the original location of Luo Fan's body. At this time, although Luo Fan's body had scattered into countless tiny particles of dust, he was not dead. Although the attacks from the surrounding endless astral winds, lightning, and fire were incomparably terrifying, they did not have any effect on the hair-sized magic power at all. When the terrifying, destructive power of the astral winds, lightning, and fire exploded on the magic power, it was like a gentle breeze blowing over a hill. At this time, Luo Fan's mind was completely attached to the hair-sized Fa Li. The hair-sized Fa Li followed the nameless divine technique's mnemonic chant and moved around, drawing a mysterious and unpredictable trajectory in the void. As the magic power flowed, the tiny particles of dust that the body had turned into constantly gathered around the magic power. They constantly condensed and once again turned into lumps of flesh and blood. However, although the explosive power of the astral winds, lightning, and fire had no effect on magic power, it was too powerful and terrifying for these flesh and blood. These specks of dust were constantly condensing, but they were also constantly being shattered and turned into specks of dust. Of course, in this process, there was about a 10 millionth of the flesh and blood that had not been shattered and attached to the magic power. This was the toughest and most condensed part of the flesh and blood. At the same time, the ability of the nameless magic power that Luo Fan first used, the super strong absorption ability of the chaotic energy, also erupted. A pillar of chaotic energy that rushed out from the crypt 90,000 kilometers away rushed through the layers of astral winds, lightning, and fire, and directly rushed into the magic power. In an instant, it was twisted into powder by the magic power and completely integrated into the magic power. Chapter 17. The quality of the chaotic Yuan Qi was much higher than that of the innate Yuan Qi that filled the untainted world. However, when this huge amount of chaotic Yuan Qi rushed into the Dharma power, it did not even cause a splash. It was like a drop of water falling into the sea, soundless. Boom, boom, boom. Crack, crack, crack. Crack, crack, crack. Crack, crack, crack. Puff, 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 puff. Inside this multicolored vortex, countless strange noises reverberated. Violent gusts of wind, thunder, and fire continuously shattered Luo Fan's flesh, which had been condensed from dust, and removed the parts of his flesh that weren't tough enough. Only 1,000th of a tenth 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 of a tenth. Time passed slowly. Many a little makes a mickle. Only 1,000th of the flesh and blood around the magic power was left behind each time, but it was endless, and it was constantly increasing. After 7 days and 7 nights, the flesh that had accumulated bit by bit had formed a bloody body shape. It wrapped around the Dharma power that was operating according to a mysterious and unpredictable path, forming a very strange body. Within the colorful vortex, the extremely condensed astral winds, lightning, and fire of various attributes that could even cause space to slightly distort continuously bombarded the flesh. However, they could only bring up tiny specks of dust. The effect they had on the flesh was completely different from what it had been at the beginning. After 7 days and 7 nights, the body that had slowly accumulated was about 1.8 meters tall, long, and well-proportioned. Although the whole body was covered in blood, as if it had no skin, it was a look that Luo Fan was very familiar with. It was the appearance of a creature that could be counted in billions on Earth in the 21st century, but had never appeared in this untainted world. The appearance of a human. At this time, The pillar of chaotic yuan qi that had rushed up from the crypt below wrapped around Luo Fan's bloody body like a tornado. This body emitted an extremely terrifying tearing force, crazily tearing all the surrounding yuan qi. Under this terrifying tearing force, the tornado-like chaotic energy seemed to have met with a black hole. It was unable to resist at all and was sucked into the body without any sound. No matter how much chaotic yuan qi, no matter how fast it rushed, no matter how much impact it had, when it entered the bloody body, it was like a river flowing into the sea. Not a single trace of chaotic yuan qi could be released after rushing into the body. After 7 days and 7 nights of tempering by the wind, thunder, and fire, the flesh that could still be condensed was naturally extremely tough. Under the shaping of some mysterious rules, this body's internal bones, meridians, muscles, organs, blood vessels, and all the other organs and parts of human were vividly visible. These bones, meridians, muscles, organs, blood vessels, and other organs formed by the mysterious rules seemed simple, but they were all slightly different from the human body before Luo Fan crossed over. Whether it was the length of the bones, the distribution of the meridians, the position and structure of the internal organs, the branches of the blood vessels, or the way of the muscles, or so on, almost every part of the human body that could be found was slightly different. It was not much, and it was even so subtle that it could be overlooked at first glance. However, it was this slight difference, this difference that could be overlooked at first glance, that caused the essence of this body to have an unimaginable sublimation. It made this body look like a human body, but it was thousands of times more mysterious than the Paisho's body, which had a structure that was even better than human body. Furthermore, this body seemed to be in sync with some sort of mysterious Tao. It was mysterious and indescribably wonderful. This was the real Tao body, the innate Tao body. It was also the structure of Panga's body, and it was also the template for the later saints when they created humans. Among the born Taoism aptitude, even the meridians that were the same size as an ordinary person and thousands of times smaller than the bowl-sized meridians in the body of the Paisho were still many times stronger than the meridians of the Paisho. The wisp of magic power that was larger than 7 days ago was now flowing in this meridian, like a river flowing in a river, or like a train running on a railroad track. It was unknown how stable the magic power was. The chaotic vital energy that entered the body rushed straight into the magic power circulation without missing a single bit, and was then twisted by the magic power and integrated into it. Compared to 7 days ago, this magic power had increased a little bit, and it was formed by the endless chaotic energy. At this moment, Luo Fan's mind was attached to this magic power, and as the magic power circulated, it flowed in his newly formed body over and over again, continuously refining the magic power and cleansing his body. As it circulated again and again, his control over the magic power was also strengthened little by little. His understanding of the power of this magic power, as well as the unique abilities of this magic power, was also deepening little by little. 129,600 talismans. This magic power was formed by 129,600 extremely complicated three-dimensional talismans that looked like the shape of Buzhou Mountain. This three-dimensional talisman, shaped like the shape of Buzhou Mountain, was extremely complicated. Although it was very small, there seemed to be infinite space inside it. When the chaotic vital energy that was twisted and refined was integrated into this magic power, it rushed into the infinite space inside these talismans. After 7 days and 7 nights of absorption, the amount of chaotic vital energy that was integrated into the talismans was even greater than the amount that he had absorbed in the past 100 years. However, at this moment, he still felt that the talismans that formed the magic power were so empty, as if the magic power was just an empty shell. 7 days and 7 nights of absorption was actually just a drop in the ocean. Of course, as the magic power absorbed a huge amount of chaotic vital energy, the talismans that had shrunk countless times since leaving the sea of consciousness also grew a little bit larger. This caused the entire magic power to grow a little bit stronger than when it was first formed. The Sea of Consciousness in the Mud Pill Palace had a circumference of 49,000 miles, and its height was more than 4,900 miles. Naturally, it was not really limited to a small head. The connection between the Sea of Consciousness and the Mud Pill Palace was extremely profound and mysterious. Therefore, the destruction of his entire body and the Mud Pill Palace 7 days ago did not cause any damage to Luo Fan's Sea of Consciousness at all. At this moment, his body that looked like a human was condensed, and the Sea of Consciousness was attached to the Mud Pill Palace again. Although the entire Mud Pill Palace looked completely different from the Pai Shio's Mud Pill Palace, the Sea of Consciousness inside was still the same and did not change at all. During the process of the magic power in his body circulating, it would rush into the Mud Pill Palace every time it completed a cycle, and then quickly travel 9 times in the Sea of Consciousness. Then, it would rush out of the Mud Pill Palace through an extremely mysterious position and return to the meridian circulation system in his body. Moreover, every cycle would also pass through his lower abdomen dantian. After traveling 81 times in it, it would rush out of the dantian and continue to circulate. The dantian in his lower abdomen and the mud pill between his eyebrows had become the 2 ends of the magic power circulation. They resonated with each other and rose and fell like 2 never-ending power sources. Chapter 18. The shattering of his body reached deep into every single cell, and the shattering of every single cell felt as if a bloody piece of flesh had been ruthlessly sliced off from his body. Unfortunately, Luo Fan did not lose any sense of perception during the entire process of his body shattering and then reforming. Throughout the entire process, he enjoyed the endless pain without missing a single detail. It took 7 days and 7 nights for his complete body to shatter into countless specks of dust, and then from those specks of dust bit by bit to condense into a born Taoism aptitude. During this time, the endless pain did not stop for even a moment. It was like a bone-piercing parasite, tightly entangling his mind and will. If he had not diverted most of his attention to his comprehension and control of magic power, there would have been an indelible shadow left in his heart, and it might have even affected the formation of his born Taoism aptitude. Due to the existence of the tearing force, more and more gales, lightning, and fire gathered over the 7 days and 7 nights, and the power of the gales, lightning, and fire naturally continued to increase as time passed. After 7 days and 7 nights, it was already twice as strong as it was 7 days and 7 nights ago. However, after 7 days and 7 nights, its strength had also reached a peak. After all, the living beings formed by the gales, lightning, and fire possessed simple instincts. Every time they got close to Luo Fan's body, they would be shredded into pieces and return to their origin. How could these cloud-shaped living beings not feel fear? How could they not try their best to avoid this deadly area when they felt fear? As such, the power of the gales, lightning, and fire naturally could not increase infinitely. Of course, there was a peak existence. After the peak came the trough. At this time, the power of the raging gales, lightning, and fire had already begun to slowly weaken. As their power weakened, the amount of chaotic vitality that rushed through the vortex continued to increase, and the speed at which the specks of dust that gathered from all directions were disintegrating also became slower and slower. Finally, at a certain moment, the never-ending disintegration came to a complete stop. The originally bloody body suddenly changed at this moment, turning into the body of a man with jade-like skin, long hair that fell to his shoulders, sword-like eyebrows that reached his temples, and eyes that shone like stars. His entire body exuded a desolate, unyielding, and unwavering aura. The born Taoism aptitude had finally completely taken shape at this moment. Disperse, the man softly called out in the midst of the chaotic vitality. The huge vortex that covered a radius of thousands of kilometers instantly disintegrated. The entire process seemed effortless, as if it was as easy as gently dusting off the dust on one's body. The chaotic vitality that had rushed out of the cavern like a heavenly pillar also gradually dissipated. After a few breaths, it completely disappeared without a trace. The originally violent gales, lightning, and fire layer also gradually returned to its initial calm. Beneath him, the second and third layers of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer that had already been destroyed were rapidly recovering and gradually taking shape. There was a large amount of wind, lightning, and fire that had exploded, but they did not form the cloud-shaped life form. Instead, they rapidly sank, sinking from the third layer to the second layer, and then from the second layer to the first layer before stopping there. After it disappeared, the area within thousands of kilometers around Luo Fan fell into a rare calm. The cloud-like life forms that had not been affected by the third layer did not lunge towards Luo Fan because the tearing force had disappeared. Instead, they paced around thousands of kilometers away, not daring to get close to Luo Fan. Is this the legendary metamorphosis? Luo Fan lowered his head and looked at his body. He awkwardly caressed his jade-like skin, feeling the sensation from his body and his hands. He felt slightly lost. However, the loss only lasted for a moment. In the blink of an eye, an endless amount of information burst out from the depths of his mind. It immediately caused his newly formed head to feel numb. He even felt like his head was about to explode like a balloon. Enduring this feeling of being filled to the brim, endless concepts, endless definitions, and endless words instantly appeared in his mind. In an instant, he understood countless things that he did not understand before. He understood his current state, the origin of the cultivation method he had been cultivating with, and he also understood why those information burst out from his mind from time to time, along with countless other things that he did not understand before. Born Tao body. This is the real born Tao body. So Pangu was born like this. So Pangu's original spirit still exists in this world. Luo Fan's eyes shone. Pisha was the first batch of living creatures born in the chaos world, and also the first batch of pre-world gods born in the world. When they were born, Pangu had just passed away, but his original spirit still lingered in the world. As countless pre-world gods were born, these remaining original spirits turned into strands and merged with the bodies of these pre-world gods. These wisps of original spirits did not contain any willpower. They were just a kind of existence similar to memory and perception. They did not have any self, nor did they have any spiritual consciousness. They were just like computers hidden in the depths of the innate deity's body. Every time the pre-world gods comprehended something, they would touch these strands of original spirits hidden in the depths of their bodies. This allowed Pangu's countless years of enlightenment to emerge in the original spirits, perfecting the pre-world understanding of the pre-world gods and guiding the pre-world cultivation of the pre-world gods. This kind of perfection and guidance was based on Pangu's countless years of cultivation and Pangu's realm of creation, but it was not a copy of Pangu's memory. In other words, these perfected cultivation methods were completely from the pre-world gods themselves. In essence, they were still the pre-world understanding of the pre-world gods. The function of Pangu's original spirit was to make the difficulty of this kind of understanding easier, so that they would take fewer detours. This was the nameless cultivation method that Luo Fan comprehended in Buzhou Mountain. The function of Pangu's original spirit was so powerful that it defied the natural order, but that was all. The untainted land was so vast, and the number of pre-world gods produced was astronomical. No matter how many Pangu's original spirits there were, they were limited. Naturally, the original spirits that were integrated into each pre-world god were also very few. They were just wisps and wisps, and would eventually be used up. The information that burst out from the depths of Luo Fan's mind just now was all the information that the Pangu's original spirit that had integrated into Luo Fan's body could emit. The Pangu's original spirit that had integrated into the depths of Luo Fan's body had exhausted all its potential and completely dissipated. In the future, No matter how much Luo Fan comprehended, no matter how Luo Fan searched, it was impossible to find any more information from the Pan-Gu's original spirit from the depths of his mind. And it was also this information that made Luo Fan completely understand his state and the future cultivation path. Earthly Immortal Tao Fruit, Tai Tao Fruit, Zenith Heaven Tao Fruit, Primordial Chaos Tao Fruit. This was the cultivation path of the untainted land. At this time, Luo Fan had obtained the innate Taoist aptitude and had already achieved the Earthly Immortal's Tao Fruit, which was enough to call himself an individual immortal. If he continued to cultivate, his strength would increase, and his realm would rise to another level, and he would be called a true immortal. After that, if his realm rose again, he would be a golden immortal. At the golden immortal, he would be at the peak of the Earthly Immortal's Tao Fruit, and then he could seek the Tai Tao Fruit. Individual immortal, true immortal, and golden immortal were the three realms of the Earthly Immortal's Tao Fruit. The gap between each two realms was so huge that it was unimaginable, and it would take thousands of years to cross it. One could imagine the difficulty of the cultivation path. The road is long, and I will seek it from top to bottom. Luo Fan let out a long sigh, feeling the long road of cultivation, and the vast and unyielding aura on his body became unprecedentedly strong. He turned his head and stretched out his hand. Thousands of miles above, in the fourth layer of the gangwind, thunder, and fire layer, a dark brown cloud with a radius of 100 miles suddenly let out a shrill scream and condensed into a cloud of 30 feet in size. Chapter 19. Luo Fan quietly floated above the third layer of the gangwind, thunder, and fire layer. His grayish-brown robe fluttered in the wind, and an elegant temperament gushed out from his body. The cloud that transformed into the robe was composed of the divine Samadhi wind and the divine thunder of earth. Compared to the cloud-shaped life forms in the layers, it could be considered as the simplest and purest kind. When it was transformed into a robe and draped over his body, it looked just like a real robe weaved from silk. At this moment, the magic power in Luo Fan's body had calmed down, but it did not return to his Niwen palace. Instead, it condensed in his dantian in his lower abdomen to form a strange fruit. This was the fruit of Tao, the fruit of Tao of Earth Immortal that Luo Fan had attained. This fruit of Tao was condensed from magic power. It could disperse and condense at will. It had a very mysterious connection with the spirit in the sea of consciousness. Even the frequency of the contraction and vibration of the two was very compatible. Moreover, it contained the origin of life of Luo Fan. If he were to fight with someone, as long as one of the two could escape, his life would no longer be in danger. He would only need to absorb a large amount of primordial chi to reconstruct the other origin, and then reconstruct his body. In other words, with the fruit of Tao of Earth Immortal and the Spirit, Luo Fan would have 2 more lives. Although the original spirit of Pan-Gu that Luo Fan had attained was only a trace, it could be regarded as a drop in the ocean compared to the entire original spirit of Pan-Gu. However, through the special effect of the original spirit of Pan-Gu and its ability to perfect the cultivation methods and magic arts that he had comprehended, the benefits that Luo Fan had gained were far beyond that of other innate gods. There was a huge difference between Luo Fan and those innate gods who were born and raised in the untainted world. That was, he had a soul that had crossed over from Earth, and he also had a huge amount of memories from Earth. When the original spirit of Pan-Gu was about to dissipate, the power it exerted was almost 1,000 times stronger than usual, like the last radiance of the setting sun. In that instant, it scanned through all the memories in Luo Fan's mind, even those he had forgotten. The 21st century was a society of information explosion. As long as one had a computer and a network cable, one could obtain almost all knowledge. Anyone who went online would definitely receive countless fragmented pieces of information, and their own knowledge would also increase, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Naturally, there would be countless thoughts. Among these thoughts, there were naturally many fantasies and fantasies. For example, one day, reading a certain novel and fantasizing about possessing the abilities of the main character, watching a certain movie and fantasizing about possessing a certain ability in the movie, and so on. These things definitely couldn't be called enlightenment. However, because of the primordial spirit of the Panga clan, the requirement for perception had been greatly reduced. Therefore, the illusions and fantasies that Luo Fan brought from Earth were all regarded as perception. Then, using the Pangu primordial spirit seeds, countless years of enlightenment, he perfected all kinds of enlightenment that could not be called enlightenment, and then created countless cultivation techniques. Of course, the original spirit of Pangu was after all only a trace, and there was a limit to its power. Those fantasies and fantasies that were too ridiculous and too far away from reality, such as the creation of heaven and earth that caused Pangu's body to fall, or the creation of things out of thin air, or the cultivation techniques that could change the sky and earth were still impossible to create. Even so, at this moment, Luo Fan's mind was already filled with endless cultivation techniques. Even if he didn't practice, he already had many magical powers. Among the countless cultivation techniques that Luo Fan silently recited, one of them was riding on the clouds. He raised his hand and slightly waved, and some mysterious rule moved slightly. Smoke and mist spread under his feet, and in the blink of an eye, a magic cloud with a diameter of 3 meters appeared. Soft, comfortable, tough, and other positive feelings came from under his feet. With a thought, this magic cloud carried Luo Fan towards the direction of Buzhou Mountain at high speed. That speed was more than 100 times faster than when he used the body of Pixiu. In the blink of an eye, he was already thousands of miles away. Ever since Luo Fan attained the born Taoism aptitude, those cloud-shaped creatures with simple instincts had been lingering in this area for thousands of miles. Although they dare not to get close to that area, it didn't mean that their natures had changed. Seeing Luo Fan coming, dozens of clouds made of all kinds of energies swooped towards him while howling. Although these cloud-shaped creatures were not as fast as Luo Fan, because of their large numbers, many of them blocked Luo Fan's way. Their bodies swelled, waiting for Luo Fan to rush into their bodies so that he could be destroyed and digested. Luo Fan looked at these clouds with a calm expression. He raised his hand and slightly waved it. An invisible potential emerged out of nowhere, shattering the clouds that blocked his way and returning to their original forms. In the blink of an eye, they were devoured by the clouds that were still intact. And in this process, Luo Fan had already advanced for thousands of miles, far surpassing the obstruction of these cloud-shaped creatures, leaving only a long shadow behind him. The direction in which Luo Fan was heading was naturally Buzhou Mountain. All his abilities and his earthly immortal's Tao fruit were obtained from Buzhou Mountain. At this moment, Buzhou Mountain was just thousands of miles away, so how could he give up the idea of setting foot on Buzhou Mountain? Along the way, clouds would occasionally block his path. He would casually wave his hand, and an invisible potential would be born out of thin air. Those cloud-shaped life forms would instantly collapse and return to their origin. Some sank into the second level of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer, but even more were completely devoured by the surrounding clouds. In this process, a sense of arrogance, and insufferably arrogant, assaulted his face. When Luo Fan had advanced for almost 1,000,000 miles, suddenly, a gray dot shot over from the top of Buzhou Mountain like an arrow. Although its speed was not as fast as Luo Fan, who was riding on the clouds, it was more than twice as fast as Luo Fan, who had transformed into a Pixiu. Luo Fan frowned slightly. He had a faint feeling in his heart, and he knew that the target of that gray dot was definitely him. He simply stopped the magic cloud, raised his hand, and waved it, extinguishing more than 20 clouds within a radius of 100 miles, clearing out a peaceful area with a radius of 100 miles. In just a short while, that gray dot had already approached to the point where Luo Fan could see it clearly with his super eyesight. Upon a closer look, it was a creature whose entire body was wrapped in a gray light. It had a deformed appearance, but one could barely make out that it was a humanoid creature. "Is it born?" Or has it transformed? Why does it look so ugly? Luo Fan thought to himself. Luo Fan controlled the magic cloud to float in the void, and he quietly waited for the figure to arrive. Not long after, the creature that could barely make out the shape of a human arrived in front of Luo Fan. The gray light that enveloped his body condensed into a gray cloud under his feet. The strange person stood there and paused for a moment. Then he knelt on the gray cloud and kowtowed repeatedly. Great Immortal, please accept me as your disciple. I am willing to serve Great Immortal for the rest of my life, and I will never betray you. Luo Fan was stunned. He had thought of many possibilities before, and he had even thought that this person would come forward and start a fight without saying anything. However, he had never thought that this person would actually kneel down and kowtow to ask to be accepted as a disciple. Oh, who are you? Luo Fan raised his hand to stop the person and asked, being in a daze is not a good idea. The person raised his head and grinned and said, Little Hong Jun. Chapter 20. Oh, Hong Jun. Luo Fan was really shocked this time. Could it be that this deformed man, with one eye as big as a copper bell and one eye as small as a pinky finger, nostrils facing the sky, a flat head like a plate, buck teeth, one hand long and one hand short, and even a hunchback like a bow, was the legendary master of sages, the master of heaven and earth, Hong Jun? Was God joking with him? However, this was not funny at all. Great Immortal, please accept me as your disciple. The person suspected to be Hong Jun kept kowtowing, and his voice was sad and sincere. Are you really Hong Jun? Luo Fan comforted himself. It must be someone with the same name. The deformed man said doubtfully, I was born in Pangu's hair and was named Hong Jun by the great god Pangu. It has been 137,836 years until now, and I dare not deceive you. I admire you very much, Great Immortal. Please be merciful and accept me as your disciple. As he spoke, the deformed man Hong Jun kept kowtowing again and again. Luo Fan's mind moved. Born in Pangu's hair, could it be that he was a louse on Panga's body? With this idea, looking at the image of this deformed man again, didn't he look like a louse? However, shouldn't the legendary Hong Jun be a cricket, similar to an earthworm? But who cares? No matter what, this person was an innate god, and his aptitude would not be too bad, since he came to be his disciple and promised to serve him for life and never betray him. Well, what was the saying again? If you don't accept the gift of heaven, you will be punished. So he nodded and said, Get up, since your heart is so firm. I will accept you. The deformed man Hong Jun was so surprised that his whole body trembled, and tears and snot flowed together. He kowtowed more than 10 times, and then raised his face full of liquid and said, Thank you, Master, for your mercy. Disciple is bold enough to ask for Master's name. Name? Luo Fan's mind moved. Should I also give myself a name like Hong Meng Taoist, True Lord Daoxian, Great Venerable Xiantian, and so on, so that people will know that I am an expert? After some thought, he decided to forget about it. Hong Jun, there was nothing special about this name just by looking at its literal meaning. However, because Hong Jun eventually became the teacher of the sages and the teacher of the universe, the name seemed so mysterious and seemed to contain endless mysteries. Now that I'm Hong Jun's teacher, even if I'm called Trash, the name Trash will definitely be extremely profound and mysterious. After making up his mind, Luo Fan smiled faintly and said, My name is Luo Fan. Remember it well. Don't be unable to say it when others ask. When the deformed man Hong Jun heard this, he seemed to understand something. In the net, there's a Luo sound, chasing, and the wind opens the curtain, which is called the sail. Master's name has a profound meaning, encompassing the whole world. Your disciple respects you very much. Luo Fan opened his mouth slightly and smiled bitterly in his heart. Sure enough, it was just as he expected. However, he was not in the mood to dwell on the problem of the name. He raised his hand and grabbed Hong Jun, placing him on his auspicious cloud. The cloud had a diameter of 3 meters. It was more than enough to carry 2 people, and it even seemed very wide. This is the innate, inextinguishable divine light. Suddenly, Luo Fan's mind moved, and his eyes stared at the gray cloud under Hongjuan's feet. Just now, he just thought that the gray cloud was similar to the magical power of riding on clouds and mist, so he didn't pay much attention to it. Now that he grabbed Hongjun, he found that the gray cloud was actually not simple. After Hongjun left, it did not dissipate, but condensed into a ball, stretching and shrinking, constantly changing its shape, like a living thing. This was definitely not an ordinary auspicious cloud. Luo Fan searched in the endless information in his mind. The information that emerged from the Pangu's original spirit instantly let him know that this thing was the rare existence in the untainted world, the innate, inextinguishable divine light. The innate, inextinguishable divine light was a very mysterious existence. In the last information that emerged from the Pangu's original spirit, there was no specific definition of it. However, the information revealed some functions of the innate, inextinguishable divine light. It was this function that made Luo Fan so surprised that Hongjun possessed the innate, inextinguishable divine light. Because in terms of these functions, for any cultivator, the inextinguishable divine light was the most precious treasure in the entire untainted world. As long as one obtained an inextinguishable divine light, it was equivalent to obtaining eternal life. The inextinguishable divine light was born from the Khanate and would never dissipate or be destroyed. Cultivators who had not attained the mixed essence Taoist fruit could only seal and suppress it, no matter how powerful they were. They could never destroy it. If the inextinguishable divine light was refined into the divine soul would obtain the characteristics of the inextinguishable divine light and obtain almost eternal life. And this was just a small function. The greatest effect of the inextinguishable divine light was that, after a long time, it gradually evolved into all kinds of Khanate spiritual treasures. This kind of Khanate spiritual treasure not only had the characteristics of the inextinguishable divine light, but also could give the cultivator almost eternal life after refining it. It also had all kinds of incredible power, which could improve the cultivator's strength in some aspects by 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 times. Master, what is the inextinguishable divine light? Is it so precious? When Hongjun heard Luo Fan look at the gray cloud under his feet and say that it was the inextinguishable divine light, he was extremely surprised and asked very frankly. Since Luo Fan had already taken Hongjun as his disciple, he naturally would not hide anything from him. He used simple words to explain the function of the inextinguishable divine light. Hearing that this treasure, which he didn't know how long it had been in his possession, was so precious and had such power, Hongjun was completely stunned. His expression kept changing. He was a little surprised, a little hesitant, and a little incredulous. In the end, he became firm and said respectfully to Luo Fan, "This inextinguishable divine light is too precious. I can't use its function at all. I'm willing to offer it to you, Master." Although Luo Fan was very jealous of the inextinguishable divine light, how could he lower himself to covet his disciple's thing? Shaking his head, he said indifferently, "I have my own plans. You can keep this Khanate inextinguishable divine light for yourself." "Well, I see that you didn't refine it, nor did you help it evolve. Do you know the method?" "I'm ashamed." Hongjun looked ashamed. Luo Fan nodded and raised his hand. A bit of spiritual light burst out from his finger and rushed towards Hongjun, disappearing between his eyebrows in the blink of an eye. After the spiritual light entered his body, Hongjun only felt countless lights and shadows flash in his mind. In the blink of an eye, there were 2 more spells in his mind. This is a spell to refine and evolve the Khanate inextinguishable divine light. You can refine the spiritual light according to the spell, or you can help it evolve into a Khanate spiritual treasure according to the spell. It can shorten the evolution time of the spiritual light by 100 times. If you directly refine the spiritual light, it will fuse with your soul and never be separated. You will have an almost indestructible life, but the spiritual light will disappear. If you help it evolve, the advantage is that you can obtain a connate spiritual treasure after you refine it, which will have infinite power. The disadvantage is that this connate, inextinguishable divine light will take at least a few yuan-wees to evolve successfully. Also, there is a small chance that the connate spiritual treasure will be taken away. How to choose? You can consider it yourself, Luo Fan said indifferently. The number of fantasies he had had in the past 20 years on Earth was definitely an astronomical figure. Panga's primordial spirit had created cultivation techniques based on his fantasies. Even if some of the ridiculous ones were excluded, the number was still unimaginable. Spells to refine the connate, inextinguishable divine light and speed up the evolution of connate spiritual treasures naturally existed. May I ask, Master, what is a connate spiritual treasure? Hongjun looked confused. Chapter 21. Luo Fan paused for a moment, but he quickly understood. Hongjun was actually able to transform a connate Dao physique into such a deformed state. His knowledge of cultivation must be extremely limited, and he didn't even know what a connate Dao physique looked like. Naturally, he wouldn't know anything about connate numinous treasures, therefore, he didn't feel offended and explained, connate numinous treasures are things evolved from the connate inextinguishable spiritual light. They exist forever and will never be destroyed. There are a limited number of connate inextinguishable spiritual lights in the world, and there are even fewer connate numinous treasures. Thus, connate numinous treasures are extremely precious. Different connate numinous treasures have different powers, and a specific power depends on the evolution of the spiritual light. However, there's a power that every connate numinous treasure has, and that is to fuse with the soul after refining, giving the soul protection that will never be damaged. Moreover, if you attain the primordial Dao fruit, connate numinous treasures will be of great use. Hongjuan's eyes lit up. Luo Fan's words seemed to have opened up a whole new world to him, the world of cultivation. May I ask, Master, what is the primordial Dao fruit? Hongjun had no intention of pretending to understand things he didn't understand, and he directly asked about things he didn't understand. Luo Fan smiled slightly, raised his hand, and slapped a golden cloud that had invaded within a radius of 50 kilometers back to its origin. He said, "What is the primordial Dao fruit? How do I know? I've only attained the Earth Immortal Dao fruit, and I haven't even attained the primordial Unity Dao fruit and the Zenith Heaven Dao fruit. How do I know about the primordial Dao fruit? Without cultivation, I naturally can't understand. Moreover, even if I understand, I can't speak for you. The Dao fruit needs to be proven, and it can't be spoken. You must remember this in your heart and not forget it for a moment." Hongjun was shocked, and he hurriedly agreed. Seeing that Hongjun was listening to him, Luo Fan was very satisfied and said with a smile, "How is it? Have you thought about how to use this connate, inextinguishable spiritual light?" Hongjun hesitated for a moment and said respectfully, "I've thought about it, and I'm willing to help this spiritual light evolve into a connate numinous treasure." Luo Fan smiled and praised. "Not bad, this is the way to seek the great Tao." "Thank you for your praise, Master." Hongjun was very excited to be praised by Luo Fan. Luo Fan nodded. With a thought, the magic cloud under his feet shook, dragging him and Hongjun towards Buzhou Mountain. He said, "There is no need to hesitate. You can act according to the formula." Hongjun responded excitedly and began to cast the spell that Luo Fan had taught him on the gray, connate, inextinguishable spirit light. Although the connate, inextinguishable spiritual light was not refined by Hongjun, it had been with Hongjun for many years. However, it already had Hongjun's imprint, so it didn't need to be controlled. It followed closely beside him and moved forward with him. Hongjun was placed on Luo Fan's left rear side. The innate, inextinguishable spirit light condensed into a ball that was shrinking and shrinking in front of him, slowly rising and falling like a buoy on the sea. After taking a few deep breaths, Hongjun opened his mouth, and a gray light rushed out from his mouth. It was compressed rapidly, and condensed into a gray light rope. Then, this gray light rope was like a spirit snake, twisting and entangling at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it turned into an extremely mysterious three-dimensional talisman, instantly imprinting into the innate, indestructible spiritual light. As the mysterious three-dimensional talisman imprinted into it, the connate, inextinguishable spiritual light underwent some subtle changes. Dozens of small talismans appeared on its surface, forming a rough talisman net that wrapped around the spiritual light. Hongjun didn't stop there. Instead, he opened his mouth and spat out rays of gray light. They condensed into extremely mysterious three-dimensional talismans in the air and imprinted into the connate, inextinguishable spiritual light. With each three-dimensional talisman imprinted, the talisman net on the surface of the connate, inextinguishable spiritual light became denser, and with each talisman that appeared, Hongjuan's face became a little paler. When the 81 talismans appeared and imprinted into the connate, inextinguishable spiritual light, Hongjuan's face was already as white as paper. His entire body was trembling, and he was sweating profusely. It was obvious that he had used too much energy. At this time, the surface of the connate, inextinguishable spiritual light was covered with countless mysterious and unpredictable talismans. It was like a fine piece of silk that tightly covered the connate, inextinguishable spiritual light. Although Hongjun was in a sorry state, there was excitement in his eyes. He opened his mouth and inhaled. The connate, inextinguishable spiritual light that was covered by countless talismans suddenly rushed into his mouth and was swallowed by him. What a pity! If I could condense 365 talismans at once, I would be able to store this connate, inextinguishable spiritual light in my sea of consciousness. Now, I can only store in my dantian. Although Luo Fan was in front, his perception completely saw Hongjuan's actions. He felt that it was a pity. At the same time, he also knew how crude Hongjuan's previous cultivation method was, the technique that Panga's primordial spirit created based on his own understanding. Originally, he only needed to raise his hand to release a stream of energy. Then, according to the technique, he could condense this energy into a talisman and imprint it into the connate, inextinguishable spiritual light. However, Hongjun couldn't even use his hand to release the energy. He could only open his mouth and use the mouth, an organ that was born to communicate with the inside and outside of his body, to barely release the energy. Moreover, the energy he released was only slightly pure, chaotic energy. It couldn't even compare to the mysterious energy that Luo Fan had before attaining the earthly immortal Tao fruit. It seems that if I want to train Hongjun well, it will be a very big project. Luo Fan had a deeper understanding of his future hardships. While Luo Fan was thinking about this, Hongjun's face was already full of excitement. After that action, just now, the connate, inextinguishable spiritual light had already entered his lower abdomen dantian. The flickering connate, inextinguishable spiritual light floated in his dantian, revolving around a large gray, almost black mass of air, like a planet revolving around a star. This large mass of gray, almost black air mass was the compressed chaotic energy. It was also the result of Hongjuan's cultivation over the past hundreds of thousands of years. The connate, inextinguishable spiritual light kept rotating. Every time it rotated, a trace of chaotic energy overflowed from the mass of air and integrated into the talisman that was as dense as silk on the surface of the spiritual light, causing the talisman to rotate a little faster. Hongjun. Luo Fan already knew that Hongjun had almost nothing to show, so he wanted to train him well. After advancing for about 1,000,000 miles, he called out softly, "Disciple is here." Although Hongjun was excited, he really admired Luo Fan as much as the heavens, so he quickly responded, "You have transformed for more than 100,000 years. Have you ever gone down Buzhou Mountain?" Luo Fan asked. This disciple is ashamed. "I have never gone down Buzhou Mountain." Hongjun lowered his head and said with some shame, "I see. It seems that this is the first time you have left Buzhou Mountain. Never mind. I will take you to see the untainted land." Luo Fan looked back at Hong Jun and said, "Thank you, master." Although Hong Jun didn't know what Luo Fan meant, he still bowed and thanked him. Luo Fan shook his head. With a thought, the auspicious cloud changed its direction and flew diagonally downwards. In the blink of an eye, it tore open the second and third barriers of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer. Before almost all the cloud-like life forms could react, it tore open the first and second barriers and entered the first layer of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer. After entering the first layer, Luo Fan raised his hand and waved. The auspicious cloud seemed to form a cover around it, isolating all the astral wind, thunder, and fire, allowing it to rush through the first layer of the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer without being attacked at all, returning to the untainted land. The blue sky, floating white clouds, and the endless land came into view. Chapter 22. Compared to the evolution of the entire untainted land, tens of thousands of years were not even a blink of an eye, let alone thousands of years. Compared to the time when Luo Fan entered the Gangwind, thunder, and fire layer, the untainted land had not changed at all. It still looked the same as before. At this time, it could still be regarded as the beginning of the world and the first judgment of Yin and Yang. There were indeed many innate gods in the entire untainted land, but the untainted land was also infinitely vast. These numerous innate gods were distributed throughout the entire untainted land, but the density was very sparse. At a glance, the terrain below was undulating and extremely magnificent. There were all kinds of flowers, plants, and trees, but there were very few living creatures, which made the land seem so quiet, so peaceful. The place where Luo Fan and Hong Jun landed was a desolate hill. Of course, this hill was also very different from the hills on Earth. The entire hill was very vast, and there were no plants within a radius of thousands of miles, only endless stones. Any small piece of these stones would be treasures that cultivators would fight for in the future. Star sand, black iron, and mineral marrow were all like ordinary sand and stones on this hill. Just like the place where Luo Fan stood at this time, it was a piece of earth-quenching crystal that contained a huge amount of energy. In the future, it could be used to refine dozens of celestial devices. When Luo Fan was on Earth, he was just an ordinary person. He did not understand these things, but he could see that the things at the beginning of the world were not simple. He sighed in his heart. Looking at Hong Jun's deformed body, Luo Fan asked, "Hong Jun, my disciple, do you have a cultivation method?" Hong Jun hurriedly replied, "When I was on Pangu's head, I saw Pangu standing up to the sky and comprehending the indomitable spirit technique. In the past hundreds of thousands of years, I have been cultivating this technique." Comprehending the indomitable spirit technique yourself? Luo Fan looked at Hong Jun's arched back and could not see any indomitable spirit. Shaking his head, Luo Fan said, "Why don't you tell me your cultivation method first?" Without hesitation, Hong Jun explained the mantra and route of the indomitable spirit in detail. "Straighten your back, step on the earth, and look up to the sky." As Luo Fan listened to Hong Jun's explanation, he raised his hand and waved. The rich, innate qi between heaven and earth suddenly gathered at the place where his hands had waved, condensing into mysterious characters that were flashing with a clear light. These characters were from Pangu's soul. They were the extremely complicated, abstruse, and profound characters that recorded the nameless magic back then. At that moment, these condensed words recorded the content of what Hong Jun had said. When Hong Jun talked about the circulation route of the cultivation method, the primordial qi even condensed into the shape of several lice, directly marking the circulation route. Hong Jun naturally had great trust in Luo Fan's ability. Otherwise, he would never have come to worship Luo Fan as his master. He was not moved by Luo Fan's means, and the speed of his explanation did not slow down at all. After Hong Jun finished explaining the mantra and the circulation route, Luo Fan sighed secretly. This cultivation method was really crude. Not to mention the nameless magic method that he had cultivated Even the crudest of the incantations that he had created before the dissipation of Pan Gu's soul was far inferior. Practicing such a crude cultivation method, it was no wonder that Hong Jun could not even complete the inborn Taoism body. "Master, please guide me." After reading, Hong Jun bowed and said. Although he was very disappointed by the crudeness of this cultivation method, Luo Fan did not feel that it was incomprehensible. The inborn gods born in the untainted world all had Pan Gu's soul in their bodies, and Hong Jun was no exception. However, this kind of Pan Gu soul did not directly give Pan Gu's memory or some of Pan Gu's cultivation methods to the inborn gods. Instead, it relied on the inborn gods' own understanding and principles to be inspired. Then, they used the Pan Gu's understanding contained in Pan Gu's soul to make up for that understanding and form a perfect cultivation method. Therefore, the more complex the thoughts of the inborn gods were, the more useful the Pan Gu's soul would be, and the more perfect and comprehensive the cultivation method would be. However, except for the freak Luo Fan, how could the thoughts of the inborn gods at the beginning of the world be so complex? Just like the Pishio before it was possessed by Luo Fan, it had been muddle-headed for tens of thousands of years. Wherever it felt comfortable, it would lie down, and when it felt tired, it would continue to walk. Even its self-awareness was not very clear, so what kind of understanding could it have? Although Hong Jun was a little better than other inborn gods, his thinking was still extremely simple. Perhaps when he realized the cultivation method, he only thought about how to be able to support the world like Pan Gu, and even the specific understanding did not appear. Naturally, the cultivation method he obtained could not be so wonderful. The concept of this cultivation method is extremely high, but unfortunately, the process is too simple and crude. You actually directly stepped into the Dao fruit of origin as soon as you obtained Qi, without any intermediate process. To be able to rely on this cultivation method to cultivate to this level of strength, you could be considered to be very lucky. Hong Jun's face was filled with shame. This cultivation method has the same effect as my cultivation method. It seems that you and I are really destined to be master and disciple. Luo Fan pondered for a while. This indomitable spirit scripture was obtained by Hong Jun when he recalled Pan Gu's indomitable spirit. Its ultimate goal was to become Pan Gu and support the world. However, Luo Fan's cultivation method was comprehended from the understanding of Buzhou Mountain. It could make Luo Fan's godly soul turn into Buzhou Mountain, which was to become Pan Gu's backbone. The performance of the two were different, and their goals were different, but there was a very subtle connection between them. With a wave of his hand, the floating figure formed by the entire cultivation method instantly collapsed and dispersed, turning into countless innate pneuma and dissipating in all directions. At the same time, these words and patterns rushed straight into the world of his sea of consciousness. Each of them was the size of a dough, and they quickly rotated around the godly soul that had turned into Buzhou Mountain. As these words rotated from time to time, words burst out of his godly soul and rushed into the words and patterns. From time to time, words separated from the words and patterns and dissipated in the world of his sea of consciousness. After an unknown period of time, these words and patterns had rotated countless times around his godly soul that had turned into Buzhou Mountain. Almost every word in this large piece of text had changed, and the length of the entire cultivation method had also increased by more than 10 times. The original route of the cultivation method was also more than 10 times more complicated. With a swoosh, the words and patterns that were originally rotating at high speed around his godly soul at high speed suddenly stopped and suddenly unfolded, showing a large piece of difficult-to-understand and mysterious words, as well as dozens of huge shadows of lice with many thin lines inside them. After these words and patterns appeared, they floated for a while and directly rushed into a mysterious point in the world of his sea of consciousness. After leaving the world of his sea of consciousness, they turned into a bit of intelligent spiritual light and rushed into the index finger of Luo Fan's right hand along his meridians. Luo Fan raised his right hand and said, "I have already modified this cultivation method, You can practice according to the incantation again, and you will be able to obtain the true innate Taoism body. Hongjun hurriedly knelt down and said, "Thank you, Master, for the cultivation method." Luo Fan's right index finger pointed at Hongjun's forehead, and the intelligent spiritual light gathered on his right index finger rushed straight into Hongjun's forehead, between his eyebrows, and disappeared without any obstruction. Chapter 23. The light of wisdom rushed straight into Hongjun's brain palace and poured into his sea of consciousness through a mysterious point. Hongjun's sea of consciousness compared to Luo Fan's was simply a world of difference. If Luo Fan's sea of consciousness was a world, an extremely vast world, then Hongjun's sea of consciousness was a small room, a very narrow room that was less than 10 square meters. In the middle of the sea of consciousness that was like a small room, a louse that occupied half the size of the room was lying there with its eyes closed, as if it was hibernating. Around the small room, there was a gray substance that was like a barrier wrapping the surroundings. The moment the light of wisdom entered the sea of consciousness, it exploded with a bang, instantly turning into countless incomprehensible and mysterious words and dozens of shadows of Laos. It was the secret of supporting heaven and earth that had been modified by Luo Fan. Although the size of these mysterious words and shadows was not large, there were a lot of them. The moment they appeared, they had already filled up Hongjun's entire sea of consciousness, causing the originally lifeless sea of consciousness to suddenly be filled with countless brilliance. Then, the huge number of words and shadows spun wildly, quickly forming a vortex of brilliance with the Laos as the center. After a few breaths, the vortex of brilliance suddenly shrank, and all the words were injected into Hongjun's sea of consciousness in the blink of an eye. In Hongjun's godly soul, with the injection of these words and shadows, the godly soul that was originally hibernating suddenly struggled and suddenly came alive. It opened its eyes abruptly. This cultivation method, Hongjun opened his eyes, and his eyes were filled with shock. The secret of supporting heaven and earth was originally a cultivation method that he realized after he opened his consciousness and recalled the scene of Pan, Gu, standing up to the sky. Naturally, he was extremely familiar with the mantra and route of the cultivation method. As soon as this cultivation method appeared, he instinctively compared it with the cultivation method he had comprehended at that time. With this comparison, he only felt an indescribable shock. Perhaps the difference between the heavens and the earth was not enough to describe the difference between the two. At this moment, Hongjun felt extremely lucky for his decisiveness in acknowledging Luo Fan as his master. He felt indescribable gratitude for Luo Fan accepting him as a disciple. He turned to look at Luo Fan with reverence, bowed, and was about to kowtow again. However, Luo Fan waved his hand to stop him and said, "There's no need to say anything else. Hurry up and cultivate according to the method. We'll talk after we obtain the innate Taoism aptitude." Hongjun hurriedly nodded and said that he was lagging behind. He lay on the ground and shook, and the deformed innate Taoist body collapsed in an instant. After that, the scattered matter gathered together again at an extremely fast speed, forming a huge louse that was 3 zhang tall and 10 zhang long. It was Hongjun's original form. Lice didn't look like much when they were small, but when they grew to this size, they looked quite terrifying. However, that was nothing to Luo Fan. Compared to the other environments in the primordial world, what was the image of a lice? This louse was Hongjun's original form. Hongjun lay there, and a modified mantra echoed in his mind. A part of the chaotic energy in his lower abdomen, which was so thick that it had turned black, separated from his lower abdomen and flowed out of his lower abdomen. It slowly flowed according to the modified and mysterious circulation route. Under the combined effect of the mysterious circulation route and the mantra in his heart, the chaotic energy gradually underwent some subtle changes. Its volume was shrinking at an extremely fast speed, and its quality was also constantly increasing. In fact, it even seemed to have gained some sort of extremely mysterious characteristics. Endless pain accompanied by an indescribable, mysterious power suddenly entered Hong Jun's mind from all parts of his body. It collided with his divine soul that had just woken up, causing his divine soul to tremble and almost dissipate. Just as his divine soul was about to collapse, the difficult and mysterious words that Luo Fan had inserted into his sea of consciousness suddenly emerged from the depths of his divine soul. In an instant, they were like a cover that wrapped around his entire divine soul, isolating the pain and the mysterious power that almost caused his divine soul to dissipate and stabilizing his divine soul that was showing signs of dissipation. From the outside, in Luo Fan's view, at that moment, Hong Jun's entire body suddenly erupted with countless mysterious rays of light. These mysterious rays of light were like countless sharp swords, rushing out from all parts of his body and making countless holes in his body. With the appearance of these holes, an extremely strong, tearing force suddenly appeared out of thin air, tearing all the surrounding energy toward Hong Jun's body, crazily absorbing all the energy that could be absorbed. Luo Fan frowned slightly. He raised his hand and waved gently, and an invisible cover covered an area of 100 miles. Inside the cover, all the innate Yuan Qi was completely absorbed by the cover, completely transforming into the cover's defensive power and withstanding the impact of the endless innate Yuan Qi outside the cover. In the blink of an eye, there was no longer any innate Yuan Qi within a radius of 100 miles. Without the existence of innate Yuan Qi, the terrifying tearing force instantly missed. After searching everywhere to no avail, it began to use the tearing force on Hong Jun's body, continuously compressing his body, causing his body to shrink rapidly. At the same time, the mysterious rays of light that rushed out from inside his body became even more blazing and dazzling. This kind of light and the tearing force attacked his body from two directions, causing his body to be unable to bear the burden in the blink of an eye. With a loud bang, his body instantly collapsed into countless pieces. These exploded pieces did not scatter in all directions. Instead, under the effect of the increasingly strong tearing force, they continuously shrank. Not long after, from the original 30 feet tall and 10 feet long body, it had already shrunk to a nearly 2 meters long and half a meter wide ellipsoid. Although the mysterious rays of light also continued to strengthen as time passed, compared to the tearing force, it was still slightly weaker. During this transformation process, it was completely blocked by the constantly shrinking fragments of his body. At this moment, Hong Jun's soul was completely in a strange and inexplicable state. In his heart, only the mantra that Luo Fan had imparted into his mind was constantly reverberating. Everything that happened to his body had already completely escaped his perception. With the passage of time, his divine soul also began to slowly change. Like butter melting, the spirit that occupied half the space in his sea of consciousness gradually melted into liquid. At the same time, it seemed to be compressed by an extremely terrifying force, and, at the same time, it was trying its best to return to the right side. Yang shrank. As it shrank, the quality of the soul slowly increased. Some of the black matter was continuously squeezed out from it, surging into a certain mysterious point and leaving the sea of consciousness. With this change, the color of the soul became more and more pure and more condensed. After an unknown period of time, kaboom! A loud noise that sounded like heavenly thunder suddenly sounded in Hong Jun's mind. It woke him up from that strange and inexplicable state. After waking up, Hong Jun noticed the changes in himself. In an instant, tears streamed down his face. After seeking the Tao for hundreds of thousands of years, I finally have a great teacher today. This thought echoed in his mind. In just an instant, his respect for Luo Fan had risen to a level that no one could shake. After the transformation, just now, his soul had already turned into the form of a thin but determined young man, and his body had also turned into a young man with the same appearance. After an unknown period of time, he had finally obtained a real-born Taoism aptitude. After hundreds of thousands of years of hard work, he had finally succeeded. No wonder he was so excited and happy.